think we are ready to get started here. Good evening, everybody. Hey, Droptimus, or how do you say your name? Axe Droptimus? Like Optimus? Hey, how's it going, everybody? So, good evening, RK, Sig, 101, Safi, Stellar Blade Game of the Year. It's not on the list, though. Hey, Jive. Hey, guys. So, this episode of Tech Thursdays is probably going to be one of the shorter ones because there's really not that much stuff to talk about unless we're talking about rumors for computer hardware for next year. The 9800X3D continues to go in and out of stock, at least from Micro Center. Micro Center keeps on restocking the 9800X3D, so that tells me that there is a good amount of supply from AMD. What I have noticed is soon there's going to be a problem with getting motherboards rather than CPUs because I think the demand for the processor is so high that AMD is able to keep up with the demand. But I wonder if the motherboard manufacturers, particularly the motherboards that are X870E, those in particular seem to be going very, very quickly. I've noticed that Micro Center's stock for the X870E motherboards is dwindling and it's running out really fast. So except for a couple of models. And then X870 is kind of the same. It's the same deal. So pretty soon, the only options are, unless they can manage to keep up with the demand or get another shipment of motherboards out for the holiday, because next week is the big shopping week, at least in North America. So obviously there's the Thanksgiving holiday this next Thursday, a week from today, but there's also Black Friday, and that whole weekend, the following weekend, is going to be insane. A lot of people are going to be buying a lot of hardware so for the holiday season. So that means that hopefully we can get some restocks on motherboards because the CPUs seem to be coming back in stock, at least from Micro Center. I don't know how it is with Newegg and Amazon and other retailers that supply the 9800X3D, but I have noticed that it has come back in stock at least 3 or 4 times at Micro Center. So it just kind of depends on where you are. But I don't know how it is in the international market. I would imagine it's probably, the supply is probably even worse in terms of like how hard it is to get these processors right now. But I think the motherboards are going to become the problem soon because I'm seeing a lot of motherboards go out of stock. The local Micro Center, I've noticed all the flagship boards are out of stock, including the Asus Hero. The Hero is out of stock, and that is an expensive motherboard. So that does mean that there's a lot of demand for building these high-end gaming computers. It's 2 a.m. here, UK time. Meanwhile, Golden Joystick Awards, which are real game awards voted by the gamers, just happened in Wukong. That happened just now? What? I've had my 9800X3D since launch day, Micro Center. You're very pleased with the ASRock Nova. Oh, you managed to get the Nova from Micro Center? Man, that motherboard is like the hardest motherboard to get right now. Like that one, I have not seen the Nova come back in stock literally anywhere. I see the other motherboards come back, but they come and go really fast. So it's crazy. PS5 Pro is readily available though. For those of you that are looking to play like the console exclusive games, PS5 Pro, apparently there isn't really much of a supply issue. Now, Sony has had more success selling PS5 Pro at launch compared to the PS4 Pro. If you look at the numbers, the PS5 Pro has outsold the PS4 Pro if you look at the same time frame of when both consoles came out. Newegg has the Tai Chi today. You blame me? You grabbed the very last Nova in stock? Wow. Wow. Man, that's lucky. Yeah. You decided to build yourself a new gaming PC. The only thing I've purchased so far is an 9800X3D. It is saying January delivery. Yeah, it's... Man, Yeah. It's almost like, see, I don't know. Amazon is taking basically back orders. I think when you place an order with Amazon right now for the processor, it's a back order. So that January date is an estimate. That doesn't mean that you actually have to wait all the way to January. Typically, they should ship. It is going to be first come, first serve. So it's like, let's say next Tuesday, Amazon, let's just for sake of argument say Tuesday random. So let's say Amazon restocks on Tuesday next week. So depending on where you are in the line from when you place your order, like let's say you're in line, so yours might actually ship next week. If you're not in that part of the line and there's a bunch of people in front of you, then they will get it and you'll have to wait until the next one, which will probably be in December. So I would imagine there's probably going to be another shipment right before the winter break. And then that's probably going to be it. Everybody else is going to have to wait till January, though. It seems like that's what's going to happen. I think the main challenge, though, is going to be it's not so much the processor, because, like I said earlier, I think the processor is readily coming back in stock again and again. The real challenge is going to be getting the motherboard that you want. Unless you're okay getting like a B650 motherboard, or if you're someone who already has an X670 or X670E or B650 or B650E, basically if you have a last gen motherboard, if you're upgrading from a Zen 4 CPU to the 9800X3D, then you're in luck because you don't have to worry about buying a new motherboard and you don't have to worry about getting DDR5. The problem is going to become the motherboards very soon because AMD is able to restock the CPUs faster than the motherboard manufacturers are able to restock the motherboards. In particular, the high-end motherboards, if you're someone who's looking for a high-end motherboard. So I think that's going to be the challenge. So like the Taichi, the Nova, the Hero, the Strix E, the Carbon, all of those motherboards, the Taichi, all of them are going to be really hard to get for the next couple of months probably. You're thinking about picking up Crosshair Hero? Well, if you're thinking of getting one, you probably need to make that decision by the end of this weekend because I just saw the Hero sell out today at my local Micro Center. So those are starting to dry up. The supply of the motherboards are definitely starting to dry up, especially the high-end boards. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the higher-end boards are manufactured in much smaller quantities than the lower-end boards and the mid-tier boards. So if you're somebody who wants a super high-end motherboard like the Hero, or like a $500 motherboard, or a $700 motherboard, or even something more expensive, you need to lock in your decision making on whether or not you really want to get one of those, because otherwise you're most likely going to be waiting until next year. Wiring and fans. Interesting. Yeah, most fans are pretty straightforward. They're either 4-pin PWM or 3-pin DC powered. Been watching all of the X870E. For these other X870E, it's possible to run X16 for the GPU as long as you keep the lanes. It depends on the motherboard. Some motherboards have lane sharing, others don't. Not all X870E have lane sharing. It depends. So if you watched episode 79, Tech Thursdays episode 79 is the episode that goes in detail on every single one of the motherboards. Like all X870 motherboards were covered in that live stream. In depth. So all the ones that are lane sharing or that have lane sharing were covered. All the ones that do not feature lane sharing are also covered. Otherwise, I think the tier list video is like a summary of all of that. But if you want like the details, you need to go back and look at Tech Thursdays episode 79. You're hoping to see if it goes on sale, but it's not going to go on sale. Guys, the X870E is way too new, and the demand right now is way too high for the 9800X3D. They're not going to go on sale. The only motherboards that will go on sale are B650. If you're looking for B650 or X670E, basically last gen, I can give you guys a really good example. Right now, if you live near a Micro Center, my top recommendation for motherboards, if you want a high-end motherboard and you don't want to spend over $400 and you can't find the Taichi or the Taichi Lite and you can't find the Nova, The last gen, the X670E Gigabyte Aorus Master. That is my top recommendation if you can find one of those at a Micro Center, because Micro Center currently has that on sale. It's on a clearance sale for $379. That is a $500 motherboard. Imagine if the Carbon or the Strix-E was $379. That is basically the deal you're getting on that Gigabyte Aorus Master. And to top it off, unlike, actually, we'll just go ahead and go to the product page here. So, yeah, this is the new one. But what I want to do is I want to look at the old one. So I want to bring this one to people's attention, because if you're somebody who wants a flagship motherboard and you're okay with buying last gen, this motherboard is the motherboard that I have used for 2 years, although mine seems to be having some kind of issue with one of the PCIe slots right now. Although I've kind of narrowed that down. I'm not quite sure, but the point is, you can get one of these if you live near a Micro Center. I don't know about Amazon or Newegg right now. I don't think Newegg has these anymore. But the X670E Aorus Master, this is Gigabyte's previous generation top-tier motherboard. This was a $500 motherboard. It is on sale at Micro Center for like $379. If you can find an open box complete edition, you can get one of these for like under $300. I've seen these go for like $280 at Micro Center as an open box, complete with everything, like, and you still get the 2-week return period or whatever if there is something wrong with the board. But this is what I would get. Like, if I can't find the Tai Chi, if I can't find the Nova, if I can't find any of the newer boards because they're all out of stock, and I had to settle on a previous generation motherboard, I would get this. This is very good. Also, this has no lane sharing with the GPU. Just so you guys know. Like, this does not have any lane sharing. Also, if you want USB 4, you can add USB 4 to this motherboard to the second PCIe slot via Gigabyte's Titan Ridge add-in card, which gives you Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt 3 capability on this motherboard. So this is my personal recommendation. This is the one that I actually have live streamed. The Tech Thursdays PC has been using this motherboard for over 2 years. So this is probably what I recommend. For those of you that are not able to find a current generation X870 motherboard or X870E, and you're wondering, like, well, what's my alternative choice if I can't get one of the newer motherboards? Get one of these. This is going to be really good. Yeah, this is my personal choice. Let me tell you something. This thing, the Gen 5 heatsink on this is better than the X870E Hero. The Hero, the brand new Hero from Asus, has an inferior Gen 5 heatsink compared to this 2-year-old Gigabyte Aorus Master. This thing keeps my SSD around my Gen 5, that's Gen 5, like the T700 or the TD510. This top thick boy heatsink keeps it on around 50 to 52 degrees while using it as an OS drive. Meanwhile, Asus X870E Hero, you know what the temperatures are with this heatsink? 63 degrees. We're talking about a 10-degree drop going from the brand new Asus to the previous generation Gigabyte. And the Gigabyte's $200 cheaper. And if you can get one on clearance, you can get it for literally like $500 cheaper than the Asus. So, yeah, this is definitely my top choice. If you're someone who doesn't care about Wi-Fi 7 because this doesn't have Wi-Fi 7, this has Wi-Fi 6E because it's 2 years old, and it does not have USB 4. But you can add USB 4 if you really, really want USB 4. So that's the nice thing about the Gigabyte X670 Aorus Master. So this is my top choice. Yeah, no, I'm very disappointed with the Asus ROG Heroes heatsink. The Gen 5 heatsink is terrible. It's terrible. If I had a Crucial T700 with heatsink, I would use the heatsink that comes with the SSD rather than this. Very disappointing. Oh yeah, the other thing about the Aorus Master, the previous Aorus Master, yeah, it's 2.5 gig LAN. If you want 10 gig LAN, you can add 10 gig LAN to the bottom PCIe slot, and that does not impact any of the SSDs. The one thing I will say, remember, the X670E Aorus Master has no GPU lane sharing. You can run 4 M.2, 2 Gen 5, and 2 Gen 4, and still maintain 16 lanes to the graphics card. You can also use the X4 slot to add a capture card, or alternatively, a Thunderbolt add-in card from Gigabyte. I have a video on my YouTube channel on how to do this. I literally have done that to this motherboard. And then the bottom slot is an X2 slot that does share lanes with the 5th and 6th SATA port. So if you're only going to use 4 SATA, because this does have 6 SATA, you can use 4 SATA and 4 M.2s and maintain full PCIe lanes to the graphics card and the 2nd and 3rd PCIe slot. So this is an excellent choice for someone who is looking for an all-rounder motherboard that can do everything that most people would need. And hence the reason why I have been using this motherboard personally for the last 2 years. So that's my top pick. For those of you that cannot manage to find the newer motherboards for just because of like inventory issues, because the 9800X3D keeps coming back in stock, but the motherboards are not restocking as quickly. So soon there's going to be a problem with getting motherboards. Any flaws on the Hero last gen that you know of? The previous one, I'm trying to think. There was something about it that I remember, but I can't remember what it is right now. That one, so if you bought it used, I think that one includes the add-in card for 2 Gen 5 SSDs, if I'm not mistaken. The new Hero does not include that card because it basically integrates that card onto the motherboard. So the previous Hero did not have the extra Gen 5 on the board. It only had, I think, it had like 1 or 2. No, it had 1 or 2. I think it had 2. I can't remember anymore. But the previous Hero... Oh, the one thing that I don't like about the previous Hero was a $700 motherboard that does not have a backplate. My pet peeve of that one was there was no backplate. But it's still a good board, though. It's a very expensive board without a backplate, which is kind of embarrassing. But, I mean, embarrassing in the sense that it's like, why Asus is selling a $700 board, they don't even have a backplate on it. I mean, like, come on. What? Really? Yeah. So that's my one thing about that one. The new Hero does have the backplate. The old Hero does not have the backplate. That is the primary difference.
Consider trying Flight Sim 2024 on 9800X3D and RTX 4090. It's 4090. Amazing.
Thanks for the super chat. So we may look at that. I do not have the latest Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think I have 2020 edition, but I don't have 2024. Yeah, I may look into it. 9800X3D, interesting. So yeah, all I know is 9800X3D is super good for like MMOs and any kind of multiplayer game and any kind of like super heavy simulation game like Flight Simulator, but also a game like Star Citizen. The 9800X3D is very good for Star Citizen. It is the king of Star Citizen right now. Don't use the SD card expansion on the Hero. PCIe goes down to X8. Other than that, yeah. But that's the case for any X8 slot will do that. You have 3 last gen Heroes. All are great. None of them have a backplate though. What I don't understand is why last gen Asus charged that much money and didn't even include a backplate on any of those motherboards. It's weird. I mean, at least on the one hand, this time around Asus charges $700 for a backplate. 2 years ago, they were charging $1,000 for a backplate. So I feel like Asus is kind of slowly moving in the right direction. But I don't know.
Godlike X870E should arrive Monday.
Francisco, the super chat, you're getting the... Oh yeah, you did message me about that. Yeah, the godlike, that man, that motherboard, that's another one that it's funny you mentioned the godlike. The godlike is another motherboard that has come in stock as of Monday of this week, and it has gone in and out of stock on Newegg constantly. Like you can literally refresh Newegg and then it'll show in stock, add to cart. And then literally 5 minutes later, you refresh the listing for the godlike, and then it's auto notify out of stock. So there is some insane demand right now for these higher end motherboards. Hence the reason why I'm telling you guys, like, if you're someone who is considering a very expensive motherboard like the Hero or the Godlike, or even the $500 flagships like the Strix-E, or the, well, this is one that I haven't seen yet, at least anywhere, like the Gigabyte Aorus Extreme AI Top. This is another motherboard that has no GPU lane sharing. So if you're someone who wants absolute mandatory 16 lanes to your graphics card and you still want to run all four M.2 drives on the motherboard, this is another one, although this is another like $700, $800 motherboard. So it's like the really, really expensive boards, like the flagship boards, they can guarantee 4 M.2 drives with no GPU lane sharing. But you have to spend an insane amount of money if you don't want GPU lane sharing and you still want your 4 M.2 drives. It's kind of crazy that that's how it is. The only vendor that is offering 4 SSDs with 16 lanes at a sub $500 price point is ASRock. ASRock is literally the only one. They're the one that you don't have to worry about lane sharing and, oh, am I going to run my GPU at X8 lanes? Like, they're the only one that is reliable in the sense that, oh, I don't have to think about it. I can just buy an ASRock, like a Tai Chi or a Nova or a Tai Chi Lite, and I don't have to worry about, like, oh, I can plug in as many SSDs as I want, and I'm still going to get 16 lanes. All these other ones, you have to pay attention. Well, not this one, but like the Aorus Master. The Aorus Master, the new one, not the old one, the new one, you can only populate 2 SSDs, one Gen 5 and one Gen 4, and then you're out of slots because the other 2 share lanes with the graphics card. So that's why the new Master is, a lot of people have told me that they feel like the new Master feels like a downgrade compared to the old Master. Because the old Master, first of all, the old Master was Ep86. It was a big boy motherboard. No lane sharing at all with the GPU. There was literally no way to take lanes from the GPU. You could populate 4 M.2s, and you could populate both of these lower PCIe slots, and your GPU is still running at 16 lanes. Now, fast forward 2 years later, the new X870E Aorus Master, this one is a smaller ATX. Now, some people don't like the large EATX. They actually prefer the smaller one. So some people see that as a positive. But it's like, okay, now it's like you get one Gen 5, you get one Gen 4, and then your third and your fourth SSD slots are both Gen 5, but they're taking the lanes from the graphics card slot to do that. So it's kind of weird because it's like, if you want to run 4 M.2s, your GPU is always going to be running at X8. Even if you run 3 of them, it's still going to run at X8. So there is a workaround, though. There is a workaround with the Master. So if you absolutely want 4 SSDs on this board and you want the GPU to run at 16 lanes, there is a way to do that, but it requires you to spend more money because down here, the second and the third PCIe slot are both X4, and you can buy individual PCIe NVMe to M.2 adapter cards, and you can plug those in. So you can put an M.2, you can basically put an M.2 on each one of these PCIe slots. So you can do, like 1 on this, 2 under here, and then 3 on this, and 4 on there. So there is a way to do 4 drives on this board.
Megace X870E is also a good choice. You can use all M2s without lane sharing. I can do -40 for all cores with 9800X3D. Only downside is no USB 4.
Yeah, thanks again for the super chat. So the one thing I will say about the Ace is definitely a really good choice, just like the Aorus Master from the previous generation. It's also an eATX motherboard, just like the Aorus Master was. So a couple of things, you did point out that there is no USB 4, and that is, there is another thing, there's no Wi-Fi 7, but I think most people don't care about Wi-Fi 7 on a desktop because typically people buy and build a desktop computer to use it with a LAN cable. So the lack of Wi-Fi 7 is not really that big of a deal for the Ace, nor is it a big deal for the previous Aorus Master. But yeah, so you're right. The Ace comes with an X4 Gen 5 slot, which is very rare. So actually, we should probably like dig into that a little bit, because the Ace was actually one of the best motherboards from the previous generation. The Meg Ace. Yeah, this board. This motherboard from MSI is a very good motherboard. It's eATX. You can see it has an SSD, kind of like on the new Tai Chi from ASRock. MSI was doing the side M.2 over here. I think this is Gen 5. But the other thing, the cool thing about this board is all 3 of these PCIe slots are Gen 5 slots. So the top one is your X16 Gen 5. The second one in the middle, most people aren't going to use it because it is your standard X8 Gen 5, and the way it does X8 is it takes half of the lanes from the graphics card slot, so you can run dual graphics cards with this motherboard. So this is one of the motherboards. Calabrese, thanks for the sub. This is one of the motherboards that could do dual graphics cards because both of them would run at X8. The bottom slot, though, is what makes this motherboard special. At least I think so. Because the bottom slot is an X4 slot that is Gen 5 speed. So if you're talking about future-proofing, and if you don't care about USB 4, if you have the Ace, and you bought the Ace 2 years ago with the Zen 4 launch, you're pretty much set to keep the Ace and use this motherboard all the way until the very end of AM5, because this motherboard has Gen 5 on all 3 PCIe slots. And the thing is, we don't really know what an X4 Gen 5 slot is useful for today, but in the future it'll probably become more and more relevant. So this is a really nice board for that reason. None of the other motherboards have that feature, an X4 dedicated Gen 5. A lot of them have X4, but it's only Gen 4, or in some cases Gen 3. But this one on the Ace is a Gen 5 X4 at the very bottom. And that's one of the reasons why the Ace was very expensive. This was a $700 motherboard from MSI that competes with the X670E Hero and the X670E Aorus Extreme from Gigabyte. However, this one, I believe, did have a backplate, if I'm not mistaken. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Ace did have a backplate, although I don't think they have any pictures of it. It also included the add-in card for 2 Gen 5 SSDs. So this was meant to be plugged into the second PCIe slot, and you could drive, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 Gen 5, and then I think you had 6, 7. I think this could do, if I'm not mistaken, 7 SSDs on this motherboard out of the box because of the add-in card. So really, really nice board. Also, a lot of USB on the back. And this motherboard has 10 gig LAN. So if you can find one of these, either one of these, the Ace from MSI or the Gigabyte Aorus Master previous generation, the advantage of the Ace is that the Ace has 10 gig LAN and it has a Gen 5 slot at the bottom. The advantage of the Aorus Master is that you can add USB 4 to the second PCIe slot if you want USB 4 and Thunderbolt backwards compatibility. So the only thing about this one, it does not have 10 gig LAN. It only has 2.5 gig LAN. But otherwise, these are my top 2 recommendations for previous generation motherboards if you can't find, or if you can't get the one you want that's X870E and you're looking for a good alternative. Minus the new RAM technology the Hero uses in the backplate. I thought the Hero was better. The Hero X670E doesn't lane share at all. Yeah, but the thing is the X870E is basically the same thing. So the difference between the previous Hero and the new Hero. The only difference, okay, obviously the new Hero has Wi-Fi 7, it has a backplate, and it has the better USB 4. The older Hero has the Gen 3 USB 4, so it's slower on bidirectional bandwidth, which means its total throughput is not going to be as reliable as the USB 4 ports on the newer Hero. But that's fine, it still does USB 4. The other thing too is Asus routes the USB 4 ports through the chipset. So there's a lot of there's a lot of traffic, data traffic flowing through the chipset, the dual chipsets on the X670E Hero versus the new X870E. Because on the new X870E, the USB 4 ports on the back, they flow directly in to the CPU. On the old Hero, they do not flow directly to the CPU. They flow through the chipset. So the USB 4 ports on the new Hero are going to be faster. It's also using a newer controller. It's using the ASMedia 4242, which is the reason why the previous Hero had to wait and end up using the Intel chip instead. So that's the other main thing. But the thing that I want to point out, the reason why I'm saying that they're basically the same when it comes to the storage and the lane sharing is because the old Hero gave you I think it was like an add-in card that does two I believe it was 2 Gen 5, just like the Ace, if I'm not mistaken. And that is effectively integrated into this new Hero. This new Hero does not have that separate add-in card. Instead, it puts those 2 Gen 5 slots directly on the motherboard. So that's another thing that's different. So it has it integrated into the board as opposed to being a separate add-in card. Because those 2 Gen 5 SSDs are still tied to this X8 slot down here. Meaning if I use those 2 Gen 5 SSDs, not only am I running my GPU at X8, I also cannot use the bottom slot on the new Crosshair Hero. So imagine as if the add-in card was plugged in for those 2 drives. It's the same thing. It ends up being the same. You add up the total number of SSDs that you're doing on both Heroes, it ends up being the exact same number. So they didn't change anything there. They just changed the way it's done physically. But it's still the same end result. What about Hero versus Godlike? Godlike is way better. Godlike is in a completely different class of its own when it comes to like if you're trying to do workstation, like a mini HEDT and you do not want to spend money on a Threadripper, for example, the Godlike is literally the only motherboard. Like the rest of them don't even match up. It's kind of, well, okay, maybe you can compromise on certain things with the Hero and you can still get the same functionality, but the Hero doesn't have 10 gig LAN. The Godlike has 10 gig LAN. The Godlike has dual LAN. Like, the Godlike is completely in a different class, guys. Like, people are saying Hero versus Godlike. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you want a workstation, Godlike is, like, way superior. Like, way, way superior. This thing can do... It's got, what, like, five SSDs on the board physically, just like the Hero. The Hero also has 5, but here's the trick. Here's the thing that you can do with the Godlike that you cannot do with the Hero. Like I said earlier, with the Hero, if I use all 5 SSDs on the board. My GPU runs at X8 speed, and I cannot use the second slot. Meanwhile, on the Godlike, if I use all 5 M.2s, I can still run my graphics card at X16, and I can still use the second slot if I want to. And I can also use the bottom slot, which is an X4. So that is pretty sick. The Godlike, MSI is doing some black magic, and they're able to make it happen because they're the only vendor that somehow decided to use a split sharing system as opposed to a straight up lane share where it's like either this is on or this and this is off, or this is on and this is like at half bandwidth. MSI was the only one that was like, okay, you want to use this and this? Okay, you can go ahead and do that. Everyone else is like, oh, you want to run a second Gen 5 SSD? Okay, your graphics card runs at X8 now. Your MSI is like, oh, you want to run a second Gen 5 SSD? Okay, you can do that. Guess what? Your GPU is still X16. So this is the only motherboard at the super, super high end that can get away doing stuff like that. And that is the reason why MSI is able to justify the insanely stupid price on this motherboard. Because this motherboard is just basically in a it's in a class of its own. There's literally no other motherboard for AM5 currently out of the new current generation motherboards that can match the Godlike in terms of feature set and connectivity. This is the closest, let's put it this way. The Godlike is the only X870E motherboard that can almost go toe-to-toe with a Threadripper, an entry-level Threadripper motherboard. No other X870 motherboard comes even close in terms of the connectivity and in terms of the options that this motherboard is offering. So, yeah, like this thing is doing, look, all those, like dual Gen 5, triple Gen 4, and the GPU is still X16. And you can still use USB 4. And you can still use the second and the third slot. No other motherboard can claim that. No other motherboard does that in the X870E line. While also offering 10 gig LAN. Because remember, 10 gig LAN takes 2 lanes. So they're doing 10 gig, and they give you a 5 gig LAN on top of that. So this one is literally the top of the pack in terms of the features. Hence the reason why they're able to get away calling it the Godlike. Because it is literally a god among the X870E motherboards. Like, look at the back. Look at how many USB-C 10 gig they have on there. And dual NIC 10 plus 5. And Wi-Fi 7. And USB 4. And you can plug in everything you want and it all still works. like what? Okay, it's like, this is better than the X670E motherboards. There's only one motherboard that comes close to, like, rivaling the MSI Godlike. And that is another previous generation motherboard, which unfortunately you can't really buy anymore because it's been discontinued for a long time. And that is the X670E ROG Crosshair Extreme. This is like the second best motherboard in terms of feature set. The Godlike, the new Godlike is number 1, and then number 2 on the list would be the X670E Extreme from Asus. This was a $1,000 motherboard from 2 years ago. So, unfortunately, Asus didn't make a new X870E Extreme. I don't know if they're planning on doing it. I highly, highly doubt it. I think the Hero is as high as they're going this time around. But the Extreme from Asus, this is another one that is very similar to the Godlike in feature set. Has anyone seen Azra Phantom Gaming Nova? That's completely out of stock. You'll never be able to find it for a while. Unless it somehow magically restocks next week. Or 2 weeks from now. Yeah, so the Extreme from Asus. This is another really, really good top-tier board. It's funny because when I look at this, and I think of the Godlike, and I'm like, MSI basically copied the Extreme from Asus in terms of the feature set, because the top slot is the X16, the second slot is the X8, and the bottom slot is an X4. And you look at the Godlike, same exact thing. You got your X16 Gen 5, you got your X8 Gen 5 that shares lanes with this top slot for a dual GPU setup, or that add-in card that they provide for 2 more Gen 5 SSDs. And then there's an X4 open slot at the bottom, just like the open slot on the Extreme. Somebody copied someone's homework. That's what this looks like. This looks like MSI literally copied Asus's report, Asus's book report, which is called ROG Crosshair X670E Extreme. Somebody at MSI copied Asus's homework and created the Godlike, because that's basically what this is. So, and the only like new thing that they added was obviously Wi-Fi 7, and it's got the faster USB 4 chip because this one's got the older USB 4. But besides that, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it has this fancy magnetic removable screen panel thing, and all these connectors go in right angled, so it kind of looks like a BTF form factor when you think about it. It's an interesting concept because it's almost like a BTF motherboard, except for these 2 plugs at the top, those EPS cables. So, what are we saying here? Asus could get away. Okay. So, if you don't plan on filling up those slots, then you can safely run those other... It depends on the motherboard. Oh, well, if you only plan on running like one M.2 drive, then it doesn't really matter. But it's like, aren't you going to add another M.2 at some point in the future? See, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. And I've seen the comments, people saying, "Oh, well, what if I have a 4 terabyte M.2?" Okay, yeah. And then what happens when you run out of space? You're just gonna end up buying another one. So again, I don't understand that, because I'm running like 4 terabyte M.2s in my Threadripper, and I'm still running 7 SSDs in my Threadripper. So I don't understand. I don't understand that. It's like, oh, I can run a 4 terabyte SSD. Okay, what if you want to run 4 terabyte SSDs? Because that's what I'm doing right now. So it's like, yeah, I don't understand that logic. I mean, unless someone's okay with deleting and reinstalling games or whatever. If I install a game, I typically never uninstall the game to install another game. I basically carry my entire Steam, well, not my whole Steam library. There's probably like some really, really old, like 10, 15-year-old games on Steam that I don't have installed on my latest computer. But I'm pretty much carrying all my modern Steam games on every single one of my computers, on like every single one of those SSDs. So I don't understand the whole concept of, oh, you only need like 1 4 terabyte SSD. So, the thing right now too is 4 terabyte SSDs are not really good price wise right now. I think currently, a year ago, 4 terabyte was the way to go. Like if you were shopping around, the best dollar per gigabyte a year ago, 4 terabyte was the best value. Because SSDs have become more expensive, technically today, in most markets, 2 terabyte SSDs are the most value in terms of dollar per gig, if you do the math. So we've actually regressed economically when it comes to SSDs. Currently, 2 terabyte is the best value. 4 terabyte is worse value. Yes, you're getting more storage, but you are spending more money upfront per dollar, per gig, versus if you buy a 2 terabyte. So, I recommend 2 terabytes right now. It doesn't have to be Steam. Can't you use a Slim SAS M.2 on the Hero? Yes, and I am. I have one in there. I have a video on how to do that. You can understand both mindsets if you have faster, say 2 or 5 gig internet speed. So it doesn't matter. I guess, but it's like you have to keep track of having to see if the game is available, if it's downloaded or installed or not. Like, I'd rather just have all the games installed. 990 Pro, 4 terabyte. See, typically, so last year you could get a 4 terabyte Gen 4 SSD for like $160. So you're saying 990 Pro for $269? Yeah, last year that was like $220. So that's why. So I might have even been like closer to $200. So typically, I always look for 50 cents per gig. 50 cents per gig is what I consider good value. So if you're looking at a 4 terabyte SSD, you shouldn't be spending more than $200 on a 4 terabyte. And if you're looking for a 2 terabyte, you should only be spending $100 for an SSD. That's typically how much I would spend when I'm buying SSDs. But as you can tell, the market is not optimal right now for buying SSDs. So you aren't able to find good 4 terabyte drives for under $200. And that is the reason why that is not really, it's not an optimal time to be buying SSDs, unfortunately. Now, I think there are going to be some good deals for Black Friday, but typically it's 50 cents per gig. That is the math. If you want to figure out if you're getting a good deal or not, it's 50 cents per gig. So in that example, $269 for a 4 terabyte, that's too much money. That is way too much money for a 4 terabyte SSD. I personally would not spend $270 on a 990 Pro. That's too much. Just got the Crucial 4 terabyte today. Yeah, see, that's even more. But see, you mean 705, not 750. But that's Gen 5 though. And the problem with Gen 5 doesn't really compare because Gen 5, or the logic of what I just said, doesn't apply to Gen 5 SSDs because Gen 5 SSDs are so new. That's basically bleeding edge technology. And if you're someone who really wants to be on the bleeding edge, you're basically an early adopter and you're going to end up overspending on the dollar per gig ratio. So, but if anyone's looking for a Gen 4 SSD, you want to try to spend as close to 50 cents per gig as possible. That is how to tell if you're getting a good deal or not. Got like his January delivery as well. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of insane right now with these motherboards. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, getting a 9800 XRD is not going to be too hard for someone who wants one. The challenge is going to be getting the motherboard that you actually want to pair the CPU with. That is going to become the challenge because the Hero is starting to go out of stock. I don't know what it's like for the Dash E, so the Strix Dash E. This one, I can tell you most Micro Centers had like 50 or 70 of these motherboards in every store. And they're now sub 25 units per store. In fact, some Micro Centers, I think there's less than 10 of these left in the store. So the supply of these high-end motherboards is definitely starting to dry up. Aorus Pro Ice. X870E. I mean, that's a good one. That one's going to have a lot of lane sharing. But if you don't care about lane sharing, it's not a big deal. A lot of people that seem to watch my videos, they seem to bring up the whole lane sharing thing a lot. All the Gigabyte boards except for this one. All of them have lane sharing except for this one. This is the only one. And technically this has lane sharing with the bottom slot, but it's whatever. The GPU is still 16 lanes. So yeah, the Aorus Extreme AI Top has no lane sharing for the graphics card slot for M.2 drives. Yeah, if you can find the T700, I feel like the T700 has been discontinued though. If you can find the T700 for a good deal, then yeah, I would be happy with that. In fact, I literally have one. I'm using one right now. See, so Yeah, I think if you want to get yeah, that one's okay though. The Pro is an okay one if you want a white build, because that one does have the postcode debug. That one basically has everything you'll need. It's just like if you're on a Gen 5 GPU, it's not a big deal. But if you're on a Gen 4 GPU, then it's kind of I really don't like having to drop a Gen 4 GPU to X8. MSI is introducing new boards sometime in December. There was a rumor about the MSI X870E Ace getting revealed at CES in January. Now, I have not heard anything about December, but I have heard there is talk of MSI introducing new motherboards at CES in January. So that would be next year. So there's a lot of rumors surrounding a particular motherboard known as the Ace from MSI, but I have not heard much about it. If I had to guess, the new Ace will have a backplate, and it will be a smaller standard X or ATX form factor, unlike the previous Ace, which was an EATX. So if they do make a new Ace, it'll probably be a standard ATX, and it will have a backplate. It'll be very similar to the Hero from Asus. Because, I don't know, I feel like MSI is copying a lot of Asus's homework. Like, Asus puts out a $700 motherboard, MSI makes a $700 motherboard. Asus does a $1,000 flagship, MSI has a $1,000-ish dollar. I mean, it's more expensive. It's $1,100 flagship. So, and it's very, very similar when you look at the lane layout and everything. So it's interesting. It's like, I don't know what's going on. It's like Asus is the Roman Empire, and they're like toppling over themselves right now because Asus. People used to just blindly purchase Asus, and I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of people out there who don't pay attention to anything with technology in the DIY space, and they just trust Asus because they've never had a problem with Asus, and they're like, well, I'm just going to keep on buying Asus. But the sad reality is they're really missing out by not doing their research and considering the other brands. Because the other brands, there are some really good alternatives from the other vendors. Like the Carbon is a very good alternative. The Tai Chi is a very good alternative. I mean, there's a lot. The Nova is like the king of value, and it's basically non-existent now. It's basically sealed away in another dimension. It's in the imaginary domain. There's no way to get one now. It's basically sealed off from the real world. But, you know, whatever. It fell into a black hole or a supernova, hence the name. It's gone. But, you know, the Carbon, if you can get one of those. The Tai Chi is really, really good. You know, Oris Master is like okay if you don't care about lane sharing or if you want to do the workaround that I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, get the old or get this. I still haven't seen the Extreme, the Gigabyte Extreme AI Top. I have not seen this like literally anywhere. This is the only motherboard that has an RGB Wi-Fi 7 antenna, so that's its claim to fame. It has a backplate and it has an RGB Wi-Fi 7 antenna. Like, that's what it can do. Oh, and it's EATX, like the Master from before. You have only bought Asus, but true, there are good alternatives. Yeah, there's a lot. As someone who has used all four brands in the last 2 months, looking at the different BIOS settings and just playing around in the different BIOS menus of all four of them, yeah, Asus has not changed, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So Asus has been using the same BIOS layout and UI for at least the last 5 or 6 years. Like, when I look at the Asus BIOS, it's very familiar. It literally looks the same as an Asus motherboard from 5 years ago. Even like first gen Ryzen, 2017. The Asus BIOS on Ryzen first gen, like an X370, literally looks almost identical to the new X870E. So, Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. So that means that they have a good foundation. The BIOS is pretty solid. There's really nothing to change. Meanwhile, Asus has kind of like coasted for a long time now, whereas the others have just gotten a lot better. That's what I've noticed. Gigabyte's gotten a lot better. ASRock has ASRock also the graphics in their BIOS has changed, but ASRock has always given you like this very nice folder directory lineup where it's very easy to read and it's all very organized. So ASRock also hasn't really changed much, but ASRock is also very good. And then MSI is probably the one that has changed the most. But when you're inside the MSI BIOS, it still feels like an MSI BIOS. They still have the weird animation where like the side panel comes over and then it goes away when you move the mouse. So MSI is newer. It's the newest looking BIOS, but it still is that familiar MSI overlay UI design. So they're all kind of pretty much the same now in terms of functionality. Like, I wouldn't say any one of them is significantly better or worse than the others. ASRock's UI doesn't seem bad at all. It does seem pretty modern. Have you been in an ASRock BIOS recently? Asus is expected to deliver 15 million units, Gigabyte 10 million, MSI 9, and ASRock 4.2. A record for the group. Interesting. Where do you get those numbers from? Because that gives us an idea into how big they are relative to each other. So that tells you that Gigabyte's larger than MSI. I always thought MSI was larger than Gigabyte. And I didn't know that Gigabyte was that close to Asus. I thought Asus would be significantly larger than the others. MSI new BIOS looks very organized and modern. Yeah, but it does, but it still feels very much like MSI's. Like, I'm someone who hasn't used an MSI motherboard in a very, very long time. The most recent board was the Tomahawk, and it's still... I had not touched an MSI BIOS in like 5 years. And even though it was a new design, it was easy enough for me to get up to speed on what to do immediately, without rehearsing, without practice, with nothing. Just like, it's been 5 years since I've been in an MSI BIOS. Let's go on camera. We just figure it out. So, but maybe that's just me being experienced with building a lot of PCs. But to me, MSI's BIOS, it's new. But personally, if I had to rank them as someone who has recently used all 4 of them, I would actually say I kind of like the way ASRock's is organized the best. ASRock's has the best... I like how ASRock gives you the description in a easy to read window on the right hand side. As you're scrolling through, all the stuff is in like a section, a window on the right side. So it's like BIOS setting, description, BIOS setting, description. So the others, Asus and Gigabyte and MSI, all 3 of the others, they put the description at the very bottom of the screen, and it's all stretched out. So if you're on a big 32-inch OLED, you have the description spread all the way out, like the sentences way. So you're literally like, okay, what does VDDQ do? Oh, VDDQ is the DRAM, adjust DRAM voltage range. And sometimes it's like cut off the side of the screen, or it's truncated, and then the next sentence is like right underneath it. So ASRock's the only one that doesn't have a problem with the formatting. So I feel like, yeah, the other 3 are kind of like, That doesn't mean they're bad though. They're all usable. You can still manage with all 4 BIOSes. Gigabyte. Wait, what? Trying to decide between carbon. Gigabyte bigger server company? Gigabyte's the biggest server company out of all 4 of them? Well, Gigabyte's still much smaller than... When I hear server companies, I don't think of Gigabyte. Gigabyte, I still consider them small. Supermicro is a pretty big... Supermicro and then Dell and HPE are like the big... But see, when I hear server company, I think of like an actual enterprise-grade vendor. Like Lenovo, Supermicro, Dell, HPE, Cisco. Like, I think of the really, really big companies that have been around in the server business for a long time. I don't think of ASRock Rack or Gigabyte or MSI or none of those. Like Tyan is another small one. I mean, I'm aware that there's a lot of them, but see, in the server industry, a lot of the big established vendors, they consider a company like Gigabyte who sells servers, they call them a white label server company. So it's like a small server company who is basically selling servers at a much cheaper price than what these well-established behemoth companies selling servers charge. Gigabyte motherboard is for Lenovo and HP and Dell. Oh, they're the OEM? Interesting. Okay, I did not know that. Who's the OEM for IBM and Cisco then? Who does Cisco's UCS and the IBM Blue server boxes? Because that's what I'm wanting to know now. If you're telling me that Gigabyte does HP and Dell and Lenovo, that's interesting. I thought Lenovo did their own. I'm surprised that Gigabyte's doing that. Who does the others though? I really want to know who does the others now. Now that you've mentioned that. Now that you brought Dell and HP into this. Who makes Cisco's and Supermicro? Asus? Wait, Asus? Wouldn't that mean Asus is the largest one? Well, no, I guess not, because HPE and Dell, if you combine both of them, that's the highest. Really? No, you said Dell, you said Gigabyte does Dell. Wait a minute, what? Is that true? Then why does Dell refer to Gigabyte and those others as white label if Gigabyte is manufacturing their servers? Who makes Dell's? Who is the OEM for Dell servers? Dell Technologies OEM PowerEdge server appliances. You're talking about what? The PCB? Just the PCB? So who? Rest is delivered to respect OEMs? Huh. So wait, so how come so why do companies buy servers from Dell if they can just buy them from Gigabyte? What's the advantage of buying the server from Dell if Gigabyte is basically if Gigabyte's making the server PCB for Dell? You know what I'm saying? Because Gigabyte already sells like laptops and stuff and pre-built desktops. Like they have their own consumer stuff. Like why doesn't Gigabyte, you know what I'm saying? Like what's the point of having a company like Dell buy the PCB stuff and have Gigabyte make the board if because some companies only trust them? Is that really the reason? You strongly believe the HP servers OEMs are created by them? Wait, what do you mean? That the OEM servers are created by Gigabyte or that HP themselves make it? No, it could be very well that they're sourcing their. See, I always thought that when it comes to servers, the OEM, so like HP or Dell, would have like Foxconn or some other company make the circuitry on the board and the lumped circuit elements. I didn't know it had anything to do with Gigabyte. Like this is the first I've ever heard of Gigabyte like being the OEM for the support they receive, the support contracts. can't Gigabyte do that, or they just don't want to do that? Because that's one of the reasons why those servers from those companies like Dell are expensive. It's because of the support. But still, this is interesting because I've never heard of this Gigabyte stuff. I'm gonna have to like research that because I've never heard of Gigabyte being like an OEM for the server, like for HP, for example, or Lenovo for that matter. Because that's weird. To me, that just sounds really, really weird because Gigabyte makes gaming laptops and so does Lenovo and so does Dell. So in the consumer market, Gigabyte and Lenovo and Dell and HP are all competing with each other, but you're telling me that Gigabyte's making the PCB for the other companies that they're competing against? That doesn't make any sense. How does that even work? HP always has their own OEM. That is why you cannot use just any parts to repair or upgrade. Yeah, this is the first I've heard of Gigabyte being the OEM for these companies that make a lot of these fully packaged, like full, you know what I mean? Like a complete, like a server or a full laptop or a full desktop. I'm not talking about, oh, it's just a motherboard. Interesting. So I guess the Gigabyte that we know, the Gigabyte that we are buying, like, okay, let's look at the Gigabyte Aorus Master, or let's look at the Gigabyte Aorus Extreme. So the Gigabyte that we look at that's selling these motherboards, this is like a sub-entity of the parent company, and the parent company is the one that has the manufacturing arm for the PCBs, and maybe it's the parent company that they're dealing business with to get the PCBs manufactured. Maybe that's how it works. So this is very fascinating because I've never really thought about who is actually supplying the enterprise market with these expensive server grade PCBs. Very, very interesting. Okay, what is the Gigabyte parent company? Gigabyte Technology is a Taiwanese manufacturer and distributor of computer hardware. Gigabyte's principal business is motherboards. It shipped 4.8 million motherboards in the first quarter of 2015. It's founded in 1986. Products, personal computers, motherboards, graphics. Wait, the innovative method to charge the iPad on the iPhone was introduced by Gigabyte in 2010. Wait, what? Gigabyte launched the world's first Z68 on the... Okay. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Gigabyte? How come there's no mention of... On August 2006, Gigabyte joined a joint venture with Asus? Gigabyte developed the world's first software controlled power supply in January. Wait, what? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. This stream turned into a history lesson about Gigabyte? Hold on. The company that everybody avoids like the plague when it comes to power supplies was the first to invent a software controlled power supply back in 2007. How come it's listed as a company? It isn't even like a conglomerate though. When I think of like a company that does a whole bunch of stuff for a bunch of different business entities, I think of like Samsung, because Samsung is not a company. Samsung is a conglomerate. The way you're describing Gigabyte, it's almost like Gigabyte is a conglomerate, but this doesn't sound like subsidiaries Aorus. Server racks, networking equipment. Interesting. Do they have any other name? It's really just Gigabyte? PGM 850 watt is currently in one of your setups. Aorus Extreme is not released yet. No, it should be out. Search the Taiwan wiki. How do I switch it? I don't even know, because it's like, this isn't even .com or .us or .tw, this is .org. It's always just been gigabyte, but it was petabyte for a few years. What, they actually try to change name? See, when I always think of gigabyte, I always think of them being like the one, because they prided themselves on being the one Taiwanese manufacturing company or electronics company that still did their manufacturing in Taiwan, and they still had actual workers assembling. Like, I think it was like less automated than everywhere else. Because I know Asus. I remember when Asus was bragging or boasting about they switched over to fully automated manufacturing in China. And Gigabyte, the counter from Gigabyte was, well, you know, we still have our stuff made in Taiwan. Where Asus was touting their stuff is made fully automated, made in China. So I was thinking, like, okay, Gigabyte's trying to show, like, you know, they're different from Asus in that regard. Yeah. Huh. It's interesting because these are the people that I deal with the most when it comes to, like, support cases compared to the others. Giga computing. Is that, what is that? Is that like ASRock Rack? Does this even show up? ASRock, is it ASRock Rack or ASRock Rack? They don't even have a Wikipedia page on this. ASRock was originally spun off from Asus in 2002. ASRock is the #1 brand according to the Korea motherboard market share analysis. Oh, but that's 2012. That's super old data. ASRock ranked #2 in Japan. Oh wait, well, man, this is some old data. This is such old data. So, okay, you know the way this makes it seem? It seems like Gigabyte and Asus are not that much different in size. I was always under the impression that Asus was significantly larger than Gigabyte. I knew Gigabyte was big, but I thought Asus was way larger than Gigabyte because Asus is known for not just selling motherboards. Asus has been long known for selling laptops, like full pre-built computers. But not only that, Asus has also sold a lot of network equipment, like home routers and things like that, and like network interface cards, NICs. Like, Asus has had all that stuff. So, like, they have had a reputation of being really large overall. And, you know, they were also the first one to start selling, you know, like the ROG Ally. They were the first to compete directly with the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch in the handheld market by bringing a AMD mobile-based handheld to the market. Like an X86 based is what I mean, because I know the Steam Deck is also AMD based. But that's interesting. Okay, so Gigabyte is actually closer to Asus in size than I originally thought. So that means MSI, MicroStar International is the third largest one. They list this as a multinational. Oh no, information technology, IT. What? All-in-one PCs, servers, industrial computers, PC peripherals. You know, out of all three of them, I think MSI is the one I know the least about. I think I know more about Gigabyte and Asus and ASRock than I know about MSI. It doesn't help that I haven't used an MSI motherboard, or I haven't owned an MSI motherboard in a very long time. Like, the last MSI motherboard that I got was the X399 Creation for Threadripper. For, like, the old Threadripper, the first Threadripper. Yeah, so I guess Gigabyte's large. So, okay. Gigabyte, like, shadows more than Asus? MSI is pretty popular in Taiwan. So, huh. So I guess, okay, so let me ask you this. In the Asian market, so like Taiwan and the surrounding countries, which would include, South Korea, Japan, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, maybe even Australia. Like, in that part of the world, which one of these four companies is the most popular in terms of brand recognition? Maybe market share, I guess, would probably count as well. But, like, which one seems to be the most popular? Like, most average people would know about them. Asus. Okay, see, that's so that still lines up with how it is over in America. Yeah, Gigabyte's number 2, and then what? MSI is number 3. BioStar? Oh no, that's BioStar. What? Okay, so it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same as it is over here. In France, Asus is king. Interesting. Yeah, Asus is very big in the English-speaking countries, and I guess in the rest of the EU, like France and Germany and Italy and those places. I'm pretty sure Asus is the most popular. Yeah, is it different in China? Galax? Galax is like that one company that you never see in the West. Galax is like so rare outside of Asia. Like, okay, see, that's the thing. When I was in Japan, I was amazed at how much Galax, or Galax, I don't even know how the right way to say that. Like, that company, you never see them in America, but you'll never find Galax in a Micro Center. But sometimes you might be able to get them off a Newegg or something, but it's very, very rare. But if you, like, when I was in Japan, I was like, man, the brands are so different in here. Like, there's no, like, Zotac is there, but it's like Galax was super big in Japan. MSI was pretty big. ASRock is surprisingly pretty big too. But obviously ASRock doesn't make GeForce graphics cards. Asus and MSI in Central Europe. BioStar is also really popular in China. Does Galax make motherboards? I think of Galax as like graphics card, like Nvidia graphics cards. Yeah, PNY I know is Paris, New York. Yeah. That I've known for a long time. That you don't really see that much in Asia, though, I would imagine. I don't remember seeing a lot of PNY when I was in Japan. PNY is definitely one of the Western brands. You know what's another one that I don't see much of? I don't see much XFX. XFX, why do they list them? XFX is a Chinese electronics company that specializes in the manufacturing of video cards, power supplies, and motherboards. Wait a minute, XFX makes motherboards? I didn't know that. XFX has its headquarters in Ontario, California, and is a division of Hong Kong-based Pine Technology Holdings Limited. So they're a division of Pine. I know they were part of the Pine Group because And they had a weird history where they used to make Nvidia graphics cards, and then for some reason, like, Nvidia shunned them because they started selling Radeon cards or something, and Nvidia was like, "You're not allowed to do that anymore, so you can't make GeForce cards, or you can't sell GeForce cards." Yeah, see, like they manufactured. This is an XFX GeForce 8600 GT. Then this is an XFX ATI Radeon HD 70 or 4770. See, so they made Nvidia first, then they started making AMD cards, and they're like, oh, Nvidia got mad at them for some weird reason. I don't really know what happened, because it's like, how come? See, when I found out about this, I was like, wait a minute. How come MSI and Gigabyte and Asus are allowed to sell Nvidia and AMD graphics cards, but how come a smaller company like XFX is not allowed to do that? See, I never understood that. That to me was kind of weird. There must have been some kind of a, like, breach of contract or some weird thing, or I don't know what the deal was, but yeah, that was weird. ASRock making PSU, PNY, Kingpin will be the first. Sapphire making AMD boards too. Sapphire's been making AMD motherboards for a while, actually. They used to make old AMD motherboards, and then they stopped doing it for a while, and they started doing it again. ASRock's making PSUs. I miss my Manly GTX 1060. The name. This was before the GeForce Partner Program. There is a reason that EVGA stopped making Nvidia cards. The CEO wanted to retire and didn't trust his son, so he tanked the company. You're talking about EVGA, right? Not XFX. Because XFX is still around. Yeah, I don't know what the deal was with EVGA, but I've never had an EVGA graphics card. I've only ever had an EVGA motherboard, and it was an AMD Socket 939. I had an EVGA motherboard for this old AMD Athlon CPU. But that's the only EVGA product that I've ever owned. My very first motherboard for my very first desktop that I ever built was an EVGA motherboard. That was it. that was it. I've never had an EVGA graphics card. I've never had an EVGA power supply. I've only ever had... I still have this old EVGA motherboard somewhere. It's like in a storage box somewhere. You used to buy only EVGA cards? Yeah, I don't... Man, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I didn't really understand the history of what went on there. In fact... Hold on a second. I think I have that CPU right here. Yeah, I've got the CPU in here. Check it out. I know this box is the box of a 9950X, but the CPU that's actually in the box, because we're streaming on a 9950X right now, and this is the box for it. But just kind of a trivia. Yeah, right here. Here it is, my very first CPU ever. An AMD. This is an AMD Athlon 64. Socket 939. There are the pins. The pins line up with this socket on the screen. This is it, my very first CPU. It gets to sit inside my 9950X box. Because I was dumb back in the day and I threw away the original packaging for my very, very first CPU. This is a single core, single thread. This is a 1T processor. 1C, 1T. 3200 plus, 3200 plus. Socket 939. One core. One core. Let me see if I can find the model. Yeah, this one. No, not this one. Where is it? List of AMD microprocessors. Okay, maybe this is a bad idea. This is going way too far back. It was Athlon 64. Maybe it was this. Or was it Winchester? I don't even know. Like, what are the differences? I always thought it was something called Orleans or something. It was DDR1. This was a DDR1 CPU. I thought it was... Was it Toledo? It was either Toledo or it was or Venice. I'm trying to remember which one it actually was. It was no, it was K8. This is a K. I'm pretty sure it's K8. Winchester? Variants of Athlon 64 have been produced on this. Yeah, mine was at Socket 939. It was the competitor to Intel's Pentium 4. My first CPU was in the era of competing with Intel's Pentium 4. And it was so much better to play World of Warcraft on an Athlon 64 than on an Intel Pentium 4. Way back in the day of vanilla World of Warcraft. It's funny because it's almost like we've gone back in time with the recent 9800X3D. The 9800X3D, in a lot of ways, has a very Athlon 64 feel. And Intel's current CPUs feel a lot like Pentium 4. Pentium 4 was more power hungry than Athlon 64. And if you overclock the Pentium like through the roof, it could get close to performing similar to an Athlon 64. But then you could always just overclock the Athlon 64 and they would just run away again. So... man, those were the days. Single core CPUs. Single core CPUs. Any advice on a mid-tower, silent-oriented, solid panel? So you don't want any glass? There's fractal meshify something without the glass. I think there's one like that. Fantex might have one also. I recently built a PC in the NZXT H7 Flow, but that one has a glass panel. It depends on the workload, though. Yeah, ARM is a huge threat to X86. And there's a reason why a lot of the gamers out there have no idea. Like, the reality is the gamers are completely oblivious to the reality of what's happening to X86 right now. Like, ARM is it is literally War of the Worlds. I keep thinking of Season 1 Beast Wars back in the day, where the Maximals and the Predacons had to form a truce because the aliens were invading, and they had to basically team up. That's basically AMD and Intel having to team up because the aliens are coming in to destroy them, aka ARM. And its legion of ARM-based solutions like the Snapdragon from Qualcomm, and soon the NVIDIA equivalent. So, oh boy, the War of the Worlds is coming, guys. The War of the Worlds. It's going to be War of the CPU world. It's going to be AMD and Intel versus everybody else. It's going to be AMD and Intel versus everybody else. All these petty AMD fanboys and Intel fanboys or fangirls all like fighting each other. Like, it's, you know how they're all like, I don't know, like, what's an example here? Let me just grab two CPUs. Well, okay, well, maybe not that one. That one's the king. Let's use these two. It's like, my Intel 14900KS is faster than your 9950X. Oh yeah, my 9950X has better multi-thread performing, and uses like half the power of your 14900KS, which will kill itself due to voltage spikes. Oh yeah? Well, my overclocked 350 watt, 400 watt plus 14900KS can almost match a 7800X3D that runs at stock in CPU bound games. Oh yeah? Well, at least I'm not a mini nuclear reactor. Well, it's wintertime now, so at least I don't have to run my heater. You know, that these type of stupid arguments, these dumb fanboy arguments of Intel versus AMD sound so dumb because it's like the people, like the real war is actually ARM. It's like these two are having their petty little battle. It's like some ancient Native American tribes like fighting over a piece of land. Meanwhile, the Star Destroyer is like coming into orbit, and it's like ARM and NVIDIA is literally up there in outer space looking down at these tribal little, you know, like insignificant ants about to obliterate them. That's literally what's going on. Like, and the gamers have no idea that that's what's about to happen. It's hilarious. Yeah, the stupid fanboyism is so retarded. It's so retarded. Like the thing, I've heard like so many dumb things from both sides. Because it's like, as someone who literally has all the CPUs, both the Intel, the AMD, the new AMD, the new, well, even, I don't have the box with me, but even the new Intel Core Ultra, like I've tested all of them, guys. Like, I know they're basically all the same at the end of the day when it comes to daily Windows usage. But ARM is really going to be the thing that's going to change things here. Like, it's going to be a crazy time in the PC industry in the next 5 years. We're going to see a lot of changes. Right now, out of all the companies, the one company that is in the worst position right now to deal with this is, you guessed it, Intel. Intel is in a very bad situation right now because their fabrication is inferior to TSMC. It's gotten so bad that they've had to go to TSMC to manufacture their Intel Core Ultra and their Meteor Lake stuff, their Arrow Lake stuff. Their graphics cards are made by TSMC now. So it's like, what are they going to do? Because they got to spend so much money on their fab, and no one wants to use them for the fab because it's not competitive enough with TSMC, but they're still spending all this money. So they're basically like bleeding out. Think of it like Intel has a bullet wound in their liver, and it's too slow at regenerating. So they're literally bleeding out from a wound in their liver. They have a gunshot in their liver, and they're struggling to stay alive. So they're hemorrhaging money, and they're like, AMD, come here. It's almost like Frieza when he fought Goku on Namek, and he got cut in half from his own Destructo disc. And then he was like, help me. That's basically Intel right now. You know, like, team up, truce, timeout, truce. and basically AMD's Goku, and AMD's like, yeah, I'm good. But the thing is, there are bigger fish out there that AMD's going to have to do battle with in the coming years. The Cell games are coming. Cell is basically NVIDIA in the ARM form. There's Cell Form 1. There's Imperfect Cell. There's Half Cell. There's Full Cell. We are going to see NVIDIA basically be embodied by the Cell character from Dragon Ball Z. NVIDIA is basically Cell. You will see NVIDIA transform multiple times in the next 5, maybe 10 years. There's going to be a lot of transformations A lot of NVIDIA transformations. Like they are already shifting into a new form. Think about it like NVIDIA's stock. NVIDIA's stock price. NVDA stock. So we look at NVIDIA, how they have grown so big. Let's look at the last 5 years. Look at this. This is Cell's transformation. This was when, you go back 4 years ago, 2020, NVIDIA was imperfect Cell. Then they absorbed Android 17 and got the power of AI. They gained the power of AI. Now NVIDIA has half Cell power. It isn't even full Cell yet. Just you wait and see what happens once NVIDIA absorbs Android 18 and becomes perfect Cell. We will be looking at a perfect company. A company that will overtake Apple in terms of market capitalization within the next 5 years. And ARM is going to play a role in that. Yeah, NVIDIA is expected to be the first Fortune 100 company. Yes. It is not stopping, guys. It's kind of become a meme on this Tech Thursday show about Dragon Ball Z references. Well, the funny thing is, when you look at the technology companies, you can literally personify every one of the technology companies as Dragon Ball Z characters. All these tech companies are basically Dragon Ball Z characters. NVIDIA is currently Cell, starring NVIDIA as Cell from the Cell games. You know, Goku as AMD, Ryzen. You know, that's basically what's going on here. So, yeah, for those of you, I'm sorry if you never watched Dragon Ball Z or you don't even know what I'm talking about when I'm making these comparisons. But I know that the people who have seen Dragon Ball Z and they get the references, they find these references hilarious and shockingly accurate. They're shockingly accurate. Like when I say Goku is AMD or Ryzen and Intel is Vegeta, I'm literally not kidding. I'm being 100% serious. So, I don't know how we got off on these tangents about like all of this stuff. Goodbye, Chrome. Yeah, I don't know how we got off on this tangent. This is the weirdest tangent. SSJ3 is yeah, you're right. It is basically yep. That is AMD's special little technique. I know all about your special technique, your Super Saiyan 3. You hid it from me during our battle. You know, like this is the thing, right? Like we were joking earlier when I was talking about like, you got mini thermal nuclear reactor and you have multi-thread heterogeneous cores, big core, little core versus like like for example, like 14900K. 14900K is Vegeta Super Saiyan 2. And you know what? When he goes Majin Vegeta is 14900KS. KS means Majin Vegeta. He gains more power. He goes unlimited power mode. And he just self-overclocks to the max. Hence why Majin Vegeta has all those like steroid veins sticking out. That's literally a 14900K max OC. We all could thank Nintendo. Thank Nintendo for new found ambition to win gaming CPUs too. Interesting thoughts on that see, the main thing with Nintendo went with Nvidia's Tegra, their Tegra processor for the console, because Nvidia initially wanted to sell that separately as their own gaming handheld, and they never really had success with that because I think it was a little too early to market. See, a lot of people don't realize Nvidia used to have like a little handheld, the Nvidia Shield. It was called the NVIDIA Shield. No, wait, no. Maybe it was that? No, I remember it being a different looking thing. Maybe that's what it was. The NVIDIA Shield? Yeah, the NVIDIA Shield was the original thing. But it was too early. So it's interesting because NVIDIA was early to the handheld market and it was too early. It launched to market in a time when the market wasn't ready for that. So it failed to gain any significant market share. But Nintendo picked it up and they made the switch. So it became a success because of Nintendo's recognition, their brand recognition, their first-party games, etc. Meanwhile, Steam saw the Shield and the Switch as kind of an uncontested market, and they got in with the Steam Deck, which was AMD based. So AMD got in that way through Steam, and then now Asus and the others with their AMD based handhelds are now actually taking off. So, what's your thoughts on the 9950X3D and the possibilities? The 9950X3D will probably be the best CPU when it comes out. It'll probably be the best in everything because it will no longer need to have a CCD that is clocked significantly lower than the other one because the V-cache is now underneath the cores. So all the benefits that we see with the 9800X3D, all of that will be extended to the 9950X3D. 9950X3D will be the final, yeah. Once that CPU comes out, there won't be any new CPUs for a while. However, there probably will be a desktop version of the Ryzen AI CPUs. So if you guys remember the 8700G from AMD, there may be an HX370 desktop variant or some form of their mobile chip adapted to AM5. I would expect that because I'm pretty sure AMD wants to be able to claim Microsoft Copilot Plus certified desktop NPU-based devices. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is if they start selling their HX370 line as a separate desktop part. They can easily do that because the 8700G is basically a mobile CPU. And they can do the same thing, just port the HX370 to desktop and then they check that box. So I think, so let's go here. So for next year we are going to see some new CPUs. There will be a Ryzen 9 9950X3D. Do you guys think that there's even going to be one of these, though? I don't know if this is going to exist. But there probably also will be desktop... Actually, we should probably say... desktop CPUs. Possibly these. And then desktop APUs. With... And this is with NPU. I think there will be some form of Ryzen 9, or what do they call it? Ryzen AI 9 HX 370? I don't know what they're going to call it. They'll give it some kind of desktop name. Maybe it'll be the Ryzen 7... I don't know. There'll be some desktop variant of the Ryzen AI HX 370. I don't know what the desktop part will be called, but there'll be some kind of thing from them next year. And then some lower end ones, like some Ryzen AI HX 365 or something. Whatever it is, they got to do something with this next year. Ryzen 9950 HX. Yeah, something like that. Whatever it is. Something like that. There needs to be something like that. Oh, Intel, we do know that there will be some new Intel CPUs next year. There will be the Core Ultra 2. What was it again? It was like a 65 watt. It's basically the lower powered variants for the Intel CPUs are coming next year. And I don't even remember what they're called. Let me find the thing. Intel Core Ultra non-K. Core 200U. Core 200U will probably come to laptop. And then there'll be like Core 2 Ultra 200 non-K or something, like 65 watt or whatever. Like basically the lower powered stuff. You know what I mean? Like the ones that come with the box coolers and you can't overclock them. They have locked multipliers. Those CPUs will come to market. The ones that no one cares about, those will come to market. And then this is like laptop. So this stuff. These are the CPUs for next year. GPUs for next year. GPUs. GeForce 50 series. All of them will launch throughout the course of next year. And then also Radeon RDNA 4 based GPUs. Whatever those are. Also, there have been some rumors, although I don't know how true these rumors are. I have heard that Intel, what is it called? Arc Battle Mage GPUs will be coming as well. So those are coming as well next year. Although someone said that they're coming out next month. I don't know if that's true. There's a lot of rumors about Intel Battlemage being the first one. Honestly, this one really does need to launch next month. Not gonna lie, Battlemage needs to launch next month or it's gonna miss its window and it's gonna be completely irrelevant and no one cares about it if it comes out next year. So, but I don't really see if them actually launching it next month. It's gonna be really weird if they do that. Okay, what was the other thing that I wanted to draw on here? With GeForce Reveal, I think all of them are going to be launching around the same time. I don't know how it's going to be perceived by doing it that way. No. Well, I don't know. See, the problem... There's a couple of problems with the Intel stuff. Intel cannot easily just launch a new CPU this time because Pat Gelsinger wants them to get off of the TSMC node and get on 18A. So... Intel CPU is going to depend heavily on the 18A. 18A is probably going to be a new socket though. So I think what will happen is next year, second half, so Q4 or maybe Q3, late Q3, so late Q3 or Q4 of 2025, we will see Core Ultra 300, which is actually Arrow Lake refresh. This is not going to be a new thing. This is going to be... So basically, if you guys remember how 13th gen and 14th gen were basically the same thing, There was Raptor Lake, and there was Raptor Lake Refresh. Core Ultra 300 will probably be the same exact deal. It'll basically be like the 14th gen equivalent of the 200 series. So you'll get basically the same chip, just with another name, another brand on it, another name. They're going to change, like add 100 to the SKU and call it a day. That's pretty much what it's going to be. They're probably going to run more power through it, although I don't think they can get away with running too much power because the TSMC node doesn't scale. So basically, this will be like another TSMC node, or it's the same TSMC thing. It's just going to be called Refresh. So that way they can please their investors and say, look at us. We have launched new products. We have gotten the word out that there's something new to upgrade to for anyone who is on 10th gen still. So that's basically what will happen next year. Mobile, no. Mobile will be this stuff. And it'll be whatever is the successor to this. But the successor to this will launch in the summer. No, they're probably going to release them with the 50 series. X3D laptop stuff was one off. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Yeah. Yeah, if I was going to buy a laptop, it wouldn't even have a discrete GPU in it. The more and more I think about laptops, I want a thin and light that doesn't have a power-hungry GPU in it. So I would want either an HX370 or an Intel Lunar Lake or a Snapdragon from Qualcomm. That's what I'd be looking for if I was going to buy a laptop. So, I mean, right now, there's not a lot of choices because technically some of this stuff got launched early. So, like, if you want an HX370, for example, right now, Asus is the only choice. There will be more. I think Acer, Lenovo, MSI, they're going to start selling their own HX stuff soon. I don't know when that exclusive deal is over for Asus, but right now Asus is the only game in town for a lot of these new laptops. Asus with their new shorter pins. Yeah, but I don't really know if anyone cares. Like, we're talking about next year. We're talking about, like, mobile and refreshes and all that stuff. I think a lot of these manufacturers don't really care too much about the CUDIM. Asus makes a big deal with AMD on HX. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't think that applies to the laptops or to desktops. That applies to laptops. Yeah, right now, currently, if you're looking at new laptops, if you're looking at laptops for the holiday season, for the Asus ProArt with HX370, that's literally the best one currently. I mean, there's some Zephyrus stuff. So they have Zephyrus. I think that's how you spell it. Zephyrus. That one, and then also ZenBook. There's like 3 different ones. ProArt, I think, is the best one from all the ones that I've looked at. Maybe some Tough. I don't think Tough has the new stuff yet. I think it's still the old stuff. Yeah, that's not good, man. That's lousy battery life. I saw one of these at Micro Center. Micro Center has the ProArt now. The sales guy was telling me that these laptops with the HX370, these things are getting like 20 hours of battery life. And I was like, are you serious? Are you lying? 20 hours of battery life? He's like, no. He's like, I've sold a few and customers come back and they tell me the thing's got like 20 hours of battery life. But ultimately it depends on how you use it. Yeah, you're not going to be able to get 20 hours of battery life if you're playing a game. But, man, that's good. That's good. Like, 20 hours. So I don't know exactly how those people are using the laptop, but I mean, with my, so I currently have a, what is it? It's like I have like a 6850H or something. I have a Ryzen laptop. That thing does like 7 to 9 hours depending on how I'm using it. So I knew that the HX370 would have good battery life because the older stuff, like the Zen 4 mobile gets really good battery life. So this is just even better than that. So browsing and Discord and general laptop tasks is, yeah. Yeah, so I can see how they're doing that. I myself can get like 7 to 9 hours on an older, like a 2-year-old Ryzen laptop. I can get about 7 hours of actual work done on the laptop. So that's pretty good. Like, that's literally almost all day battery life. If I run the brightness all the way down, like if I run it on the lowest brightness setting, I can easily get like 9 hours of battery life out of my current 2-year-old AMD laptop, my Ryzen-based laptop. So I'm definitely not like super, oh wow, 20 hours, because I'm able to do like 9. But yeah, that's like double the battery life of what I'm getting. So it's believable. Zephyrus successor next year. Yeah, pretty much. So here's the thing, all the gaming laptops are going to be all like Ryzen plus GeForce mostly. Thin and light, or let's just say Ultrabook. Ultrabook will be either Ryzen HX. Well, okay, this is Ryzen HX. We're talking about new. We're not talking about old stuff. So no 14th gen, no 13th gen. That's too old. That's too power hungry. Ultrabook, Ryzen HX, plus, well, this is integrated. And then Lunar Lake from Intel. The Intel Lunar Lake is going to be Ultrabook because this is basically an SoC with its own lane allocation. So this was not going to be paired up with a GeForce. I think it's going to be like Arrow Lake. Arrow Lake will come out on laptops sometime in the middle of next year. And that will be that'll be the equivalent. So like eventually, Arrow Lake mobile plus battle. Well, no, I don't even think Intel's doing Battle Mage on mobile. They want to, but they'll only have that in the integrated. So it would be like G4 / Radeon. Although I don't really see a lot of Radeon mobile. But basically, for gaming laptops, that is what you can expect to see next year. And then, you know what? Okay, I'm going to just simplify this to DGPU. And then Ultrabook also Snapdragon Elite. Those are the Ultrabooks. These are the gaming laptops. So, is there any category I'm leaving out? Okay, basically everything else will just be the regular stuff. You know, all the mainstream laptops, the generic like $400 Best Buy special or whatever, those laptops. Those will also just be mixed in. The essentials laptops, I guess. Well, they've been doing the MacBook vibes for a long time. The Zephyrus is not the first time they've done that. I don't know if that's next year. That's probably going to be 2026. If you're the NVIDIA CPU. 2024 laptops were near identical clones of MacBooks with equal speakers and best OLED screen. Yeah, that's the reason why I really like this one, the Pro Art. The ProArt one, I've been eyeing the ProArt laptop for a while, actually, but I keep on telling myself I don't need to get this. I need to wait. I need to keep waiting. Because I'm waiting for a Lenovo. Come on, Lenovo. I'm waiting for the exclusive Asus deal to go away. So Lenovo can launch their own... Like, I want a ThinkPad with the HX370. That's the laptop that I'm waiting to upgrade to. And that's probably going to be, like, next summer. Or next fall. Basically a year from now is when I'm probably going to get a new laptop. Lenovo will get first gen. Yeah, I'm waiting for Lenovo's ThinkPads. I'm a ThinkPad guy. I got lots of ThinkPad videos on my channel. Lenovo is the only laptop brand that I have videos on the channel. Like, I have not featured any other brand. As far as I know, it's basically Lenovo ThinkPad and, like, one Lenovo Legion. And that was it. So, I'm basically I got too many... See, the problem... Here's the problem, guys. I've got too many of these. I've got way too many of these Lenovo chargers. I've got Lenovo chargers like all over the place. These Lenovo chargers that use this, it looks like a USB. It's not a USB. It's their slim tip rectangular power adapter. I've got so many Lenovo chargers littered all over the place. This one was literally on the floor. It isn't even connected to anything. There's a Lenovo charger here. There's a Lenovo charger over there. There's a Lenovo charger in the other room. There's a Lenovo charger over there. There's like another one with a docking station over there. The problem for me is I am too much of a Lenovo shop that for me to move to Asus or any of the others is way too challenging. Because I've got too many, like... This Lenovo charger is from like 2015. This is literally a 9-year-old charger, and it still works with their gaming Legion laptops and their business ThinkPads. So I could literally go and buy a brand new Lenovo gaming laptop or business laptop, doesn't even matter, and both of them will work with this 9-year-old AC adapter. So that's the reason why I'm probably going to end up waiting for Lenovo. I've got too many Lenovo ThinkPads over the years. Just too much Lenovo. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Unless the other vendors want to start sending me review samples, don't expect to see any other laptop on this channel except Lenovo laptops. You're too much of an Asus shill. At least on Zephyrus. I'm not even a Lenovo shill. I guess I'm like a ThinkPad shill. Because I've got, like, okay, let's see my ThinkPad collection. I've got a ThinkPad T400, ThinkPad T500. Now, these use the older charger. These have the round circular charger, which is actually superior to the newer one. ThinkPad T400, ThinkPad T500, ThinkPad W520, ThinkPad A485, ThinkPad... Oh, wait, I forgot one. ThinkPad P51, 485... L15 Gen 2 ThinkPad. Oh, what's my most current one that I'm using right now? P15. No, what is it? P15V Gen 3? Yeah. So I've got like a whole bunch of ThinkPads. These 3 use the old charger, but these 4 use... Well, okay, no, that's not true. These use USB-C, but this one and this one use that rectangular charger. And I also have a Lenovo Legion 5. I have a Legion 5. This is a 2020 edition. So this, and this, no, this, and this all use the exact same charger. So it's just so convenient because it doesn't matter which laptop out of those three that I'm using, I take it into any of the rooms that have a charger just laying on the ground, and I can just charge any of those laptops. You see what I'm saying? Like if I had like an Asus laptop, I'd only have the one Asus charger, and it would just be kind of annoying. So, but the new laptops have really good battery life, so it's not that big of a deal. The more I think about it. You got the X870E Hero and the 9900X. Oh, it's overpriced? Yeah, because it is the best mini HEDT CPU right now. It's like the most consistent in terms of performance. Because it's on a more mature BIOS than the Intel Core Ultra. And you don't have to worry about application compatibility issues with big core, little core. So yeah, the 9950X is actually really good. 9900X is fine though. Yeah, 12 core, 24 thread is no slouch. But yeah, like this is basically all my laptops. So now people know exactly what laptops I have or used over the years. Obviously, I don't use these old ones anymore, but I still have them somewhere. Hopefully, Lenovo will choose not a hard glossy display. Yeah, every single one of my laptops have a matte screen. These are non-glossy matte screens. So, in fact, now I kind of want to know, like, what are the CPUs in these? I'm running out of space. I'm gonna have to delete stuff because I'm running out of space. I'll just have to write it in a different color. We'll have to do like red. This is an Intel T9400 or Core 2 T9400. This one was a Core 2 P8700 or something. Oh boy, I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting my really old laptops. This one was a Sandy Bridge Core i7 27020QM 2720QM or something. I'm trying to remember these CPUs. The P51 was a Kaby Lake i7 7700HQ. And then I made the switch to Ryzen. So then it was Ryzen 7 2700U for the A485. Then the Legion had a Ryzen 7 4800H. That was the Renoir series. That was when AMD started doing really good battery life. It started with the Zen 2 Plus CPUs. Then the ThinkPad L15, I think, has a Ryzen 7 5800U. And then the current daily driver laptop that I use has a Ryzen 7 6850H. There. I don't know if this is the correct on this one. This is the one I'm not sure of. These other ones, I'm pretty sure these are correct. Yeah, so these are my laptop CPUs. Color palette comes out. Well, that was because I was running out of space. But those are my laptop CPUs. So I really want one of these, guys. I really want one of those HX370s. to replace this stuff. Just mainly because of the battery life. And because it has the whole, like, oh, it does the whole AI 50 tops or whatever. You didn't wait for the X3D because X3D are best for 1080p and 1440. Are you gaming at 4K? If you're gaming at 4K, then yeah, it doesn't make much of a difference. It still makes a little bit of a difference, but it's not as noticeable. But yeah, if you game at 4K, you're totally fine on a non-X3D CPU. At 4K, the GPU is the bottleneck 99% of the time anyway. So, you know, it's whatever. Yeah, I feel like for productivity though, the Ryzen 9s are definitely better than the Ryzen 7. Laptop with USB 4 is a bit life-changing. Yeah, I know. This laptop has USB 4. This CPU and that laptop. My current laptop has USB 4. And I use a Thunderbolt 4 docking station with it from Lenovo. And it works flawlessly with the USB 4 port on the Lenovo ThinkPad. So I use it every day. So that's the reason why, yeah, man, I am so used to USB 4 now. Like, if I'm buying a motherboard, the motherboard has to have USB 4. It has to have USB 4. This USB 4. That's the, out of all my laptops. Oh, actually, hold on a second. This laptop, this one, the P51 is USB 4 compatible as well, because that one has Thunderbolt 3. These are equivalent. So yeah, I actually have two ThinkPads that have USB 4 compatibility. My old P51 with the Intel 7th Gen Kaby Lake, my last Intel laptop, and my most recent Ryzen laptop, both of them have USB 4 compatibility. Wow. Wow, those are both the desktop replacements, though. Those are the really big, thick boy ThinkPads that are heavy. Those are the Performance series, P series. Yeah, for those of you that are curious, like how I utilize USB 4 with my ThinkPad laptop, you should look up my video, search on my channel if you ever want to see how USB 4 benefits a laptop. The benefits are far more tangible than on desktop. Check out, just search on the channel for the ThinkPad P15V Gen 3, and you will find it. Most modern AAA games can't run at 4K, even with the 4090, so you will use 1440. Yeah, but you'll still end up using, like, for non-gaming scenarios, though, if you're on 4K, you're still going to benefit from the 4K monitor for the extra screen space. I mean, that's why I use 4K. I primarily use it just because of the screen real estate for productivity more than anything else. I mean, it's also nice when you're, like, watching 4K, like, whether it's YouTube videos or anything, really, like 4K, the 4K monitor, you can actually benefit from the 4K. Why get 4080 or 4090 though if you're not? Wait, what was the original thing? You have 4K monitor as a I have a 4K monitor as primary, so I just use it as gaming as well. Yeah, that's what I do. I literally have a similar setup. So currently I am looking at you guys on a 4K monitor. So my current setup looks like this. I have a 4K monitor, a 27-inch 4K monitor, and then I have a 24-inch 1440p. And then I have another one over here, 1440p, 24 inches. So I have 1440, 24 inch, 4K, 27 inch. 1440, 24 inch. This is what I use for my stream PC. So right now, like, I'll give you guys an example. Like Paint, the Paint window that you guys are seeing is on this monitor to the left of me. This is where Paint is. The chat is right here on a browser window. Right there. And then on this monitor, I have other stuff. I've got like Task Manager. I've got like my email stuff. I got like the Chrome stuff is like over here on this monitor. So I mean, technically I could have it on this monitor as well if I wanted. So, but sometimes like if I open up, for example, if I'm gonna show you guys like Zen timings or hardware info or something, I'll have those like on there. So that's typically how I do things. But the primary monitor is the 4K monitor. Like, that's the one that has the Windows Task Manager down here. I don't have Task Manager on the other two monitors. Or not Task Manager, the Task Bar. No, none of them are curved. But I have them angled. Like, I have the two side monitors, like, arched toward me. Not, like, flat. But no, I don't use any curved monitor. No ultra wide, no curved. These are all standard 16:9 panels. '65, 120 hertz, 4K, Samsung OLED. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm only streaming at 1440. Yeah. But this is my current setup. So, like, when I'm looking at the chat, I'm looking at you guys on the 4K monitor. That's why, and it's the same thing when I do my live PC build. Like, when I'm doing the live PC build, I'm just sitting way further back. So you can imagine, like, because it's a 4K screen, and it's a 27-inch panel, and I use the monitor at 100% scaling. I don't use 125, 150%, 175, 200%. No, I use my 27-inch 4K at 100% scaling. So all the icons, all the little like task bar menu icons, everything is so small and so sharp and crisp because it's on a 27-inch 4K. It is super dense. The pixel density is insane. So that's why the only time I've ever had to increase the size of the browser is if I'm doing the live stream build and I'm sitting way far back from the screen and you guys are like typing, the chat is so small and I'm so far away, so I have to increase the size of the browser window. I have to magnify it by like 50% or something. So I gotta move. That's like the only time I ever have to make it larger, though. But yeah, I've basically had this setup since August of 2022. I made the jump to 4K more than 2 years ago now. Prior to that, my previous setup was triple 1440p. I used to have 14, it was the exact same monitor as the other two. It was 1440p, 24 inches. There was just a third monitor in the middle. So I've swapped that for the 4K 27. That's the only change that I've made. I've had these two monitors. I've had these monitors since summer 2017. So I've been on 1440p, triple 1440p, since the summer of 2017. RX Vega 64 was the GPU that made me swap over to 1440p. That's how long ago. So to me, when people talk about 1440p, to me, that sounds like so 7 years ago, man. Like 1440p is like, I don't know. It's like I don't think it's cool. I think it's like old school at this point. 4K is where it's at. Like all the big, so like the big reviewers like IGN, GameSpot, Easy Allies, even like the like smaller independent gamer streamers slash channels. Man, all those guys are on 4K monitors. Like they've all told me they're 4K monitors. Like, and they even talk about it in their podcasts. They're like, we're gaming on 4K. Digital Foundry, all those guys, man, they're on 4K OLEDs. Like, the people talking about 1440p for gaming, I'm like, man, that sounds so 2017. Because, I mean, these monitors right here, for example, this is 144 hertz. This is 144 hertz. You know? This is also 144 hertz. So, like, I've been on high refresh for a pretty long time. One of the guys went back to 1440 OLED. Who? Because pretty much all of them are on 4K. Rich, John, Alex, all of them are on 4K OLED. Tom is on 4K OLED. I think because Rich got all of them 4K monitors for work. If you're talking about 480, 480 is actually the LG 32-inch OLED. It just does 1080, 480 hertz mode. I have that monitor. That's not the setup that I'm using. See, the thing is, I have another setup literally over to the right of me. So, how am I gonna? I'm really running out of space here. But the other setup that you guys don't always see. So, okay, here's the way you can tell. If it's Thursdays, if we're doing Tech Thursdays, this is my setup. This is the Tech Thursdays machine. This is Tech Thursdays setup. Triple monitors. I have dual 1440, 144, 24-inch, and I have a single 4K 27. But if we're on the weekend, if this was, say, a Saturday stream, Saturday evening stream, I would not be using this. You guys wouldn't be seeing this setup. Like, I would be using the setup that we built last week, which was the NZXT H7 with the new 9800X3D. The 9800X3D is using a completely different setup. So, I guess I can, because I don't know, sometimes people find it interesting to know what other people are using or whatever. How do I delete this stuff? I forgot. Oh, this. So we don't need any of this stuff. I'm going to just go ahead and delete this. We're going to clear up a bunch of this. So the weekend, let's say the gaming stream setup, and we're about to start talking about Game of the Year contenders because that's the last topic of the night. But for my gaming setup, let me try to get this to scale. So yeah, so the gaming setup is, again, triple monitors. Make sure I got this to scale. So yeah, that's almost the right size. And this one's also almost the right size. This is roughly the same. That's too big, actually. Okay. So my gaming setup. So this one is the Tech Thursdays. This is my 9950X stream PC for like Tech Thursdays, right? So whatever. So the PC that I'm on right now is this one. This one. The other PC is 9800X3D. This is the gaming PC, quote unquote gaming PC. This one uses a 4K 32-inch OLED. This is the LG Ultra Gear. You may have heard of it. This is the LG Ultra Gear. This is that brand new monitor that came out earlier this year. This is the one that has the dual mode. This is 240 hertz 4K or 480 hertz 1080. This is my best monitor. So this is the what I call the true good gaming monitor. So that's the OLED. This is the HDR. This is the really good stuff. And then over here again we have 1440p 24-inch 144 hertz, and again another 1440p 24-inch 144 hertz. So this is basically these are my two setups. So this is the one that's literally over there, which is the gaming stuff. And the way you can tell is if you guys see me with nothing behind me because there's a green screen, then we are using the 9950X. If you see me with a background behind me, there's stuff in my room, and the lighting is not that good, that means I'm on the 9800X3D gaming using the OLED panel. And I've recently moved the PS5 Pro. The PS5 Pro is now also connected to this PC via a capture card. So, no, man. 1440p 24-inch is the best resolution. It's the best resolution. Or best screen size for that resolution. 1440p. It's actually 23.8 inches. So, yeah. Yes, there's a green screen behind me. There's literally a green screen behind me. There's a physical green screen behind me. So, and that is something that I do not have with this setup. Yeah, the one thing I want to say about these monitors are no longer manufactured. So I got into 1440p when it was like the best time to get 1440p. Back when you could get high refresh 24-inch. And these are these are considered some of the best gaming monitors back in the day. Because gamers want, I'm talking about competitive gamers want 24-inch. The smaller the physical size, the better. Because the competitive gamers, they want to be able to see every single detail in their immediate peripheral vision. And that's the reason why 1440-24 with 144 was a very competitive gaming monitor back in the day. And that is the reason why I'm a big advocate for the smaller the size with the higher pixel density, the better. That is the reason why my first 4K monitor was a 27-inch 4K. And next year, we'll hopefully be getting 27-inch 4K OLEDs next year. So, but I have gotten very used to the 32-inch OLED. I will say that the cool thing about this setup is that when you run all three of these monitors at 100% DPI Windows scaling, and let's say you have a window, let's say I've got a window, like an application, like I've got a Chrome browser open. When I drag the window across these monitors, because the pixel density is so similar, the PPI, the DPI is almost the same. 24-inch is still not, 24-inch 1440 is still not as dense as 32-inch 4K. So when I drag this window across the screen, it becomes a little bit larger on the 1440p screen. When I drag it over to the 4K, it shrinks a little bit as it goes into the 4K screen because the 4K pixel density is so great. It's so dense. Meanwhile, on the Tech Thursdays PC, what I have found, I don't really like this, but I've gotten used to it because I've used this for 2 years now. If I have a window on the 1440-24, and if I move it over, as I drag it over to the 4K at 100% scaling, that window shrinks a lot when it's on the 4K screen. I drag it over here, it blows up as it goes into the 24-inch. It's because the density of the 27-inch 4K is so dense compared to a 24-inch 1440. See, and this is the reason why all these 27-inch 1440p screens are such a disappointment to me. Like, Sony just came out with a really nice 480 hertz 1440p, and I was really wanting to get that, but what ruined it for me was that they made it 27 inches. If Sony had made a 24-inch 1440p OLED that could do 480 hertz, I probably would have considered buying that monitor. But because it's 27-inch 1440, I will never buy that monitor. I will never, ever buy a 27-inch 1440p. It's way too big for that resolution. Everything just looks like a blurry mess, especially if you're using an OLED. Because the problem with OLED, and no one really talks about OLED until you start doing your research on this, the bad thing about OLED, it doesn't matter whether it's LG or Samsung. It doesn't matter if it's QOLED or WOLED or QD-OLED or WOLED. It doesn't matter. Both of them have a substandard pixel arrangement. And because of that, text can be very blurry on the OLED. But the thing is, if you have a 4K screen, the problem goes away because it is such a dense resolution. Because there's such dense packing of pixels, you don't see the blurry mess when trying to read stuff on an OLED. Yes, exactly, the triangle pattern. This problem is very noticeable on 1440p 27-inch OLEDs. And that is the reason why I will never buy a 27-inch 1440p panel. Ever. I will never even consider them at all. They're completely dead to me. They don't even exist as far as I'm concerned. I will only consider no larger than 24-inch 1440p. I mean, there's a reason why I'm still using these monitors as my left and right monitors as far back as 2017. And I don't plan on changing them anytime soon. And these are old TN panels. These 4 monitors are TN gamer. These are competitive gaming monitors. Those 4 monitors. TN. 2 millisecond gray to gray on all 4 of those panels. And that is super nice, dense picture on a 1440p at that nice 27-inch crispy, smaller screen. But yeah, this is basically what I use. As you can tell, the middle monitor is my experimental display. This is where I experiment with different display technologies. So only now have I've delved into the world of OLED. I've never used OLED until this year. Not for competitive gaming and pixel response. TN is the best. TN has the fastest response compared to IPS. Now, compared to OLED, no. OLED's better than TN. But out of all the other technologies, TN is the fastest. All of them use TN. Well, all of them used to use TN. TN is the oldest technology, guys. TN is like the first iteration of LCD monitors. Or LED LCD monitors. Twisted pneumatic. Yeah, I guess I should specify. TN. Well, whatever. You guys know. They're all 4 of these are TN. They're all TN. 144. Samsung has used a bunch of panel types. VA was pretty... I didn't like VA because of the crush. If you're looking at it head on, it can cancel out some of the detail. Now, a good VA panel doesn't do that, but most VA panels do that. And VA had really, really bad response time compared to TN back in the day. I've used VA in the past. So, these monitors... What are these monitors called? These are AOC Agon. For the people probably going to wonder, like, what is this magic monitor that he's using? AOC Agon. What is the model number? Q. Hold on, what does it say in the display? AG, we'll just get rid of Agon. AOC AG241QG4. That's basically all four of those monitors. And then you guys know the Ultra Gear. And then this one is the Sony InZone M9. This is a 2-year-old monitor. This is this is an IPS. So this one's IPS. This is TN. These are all TN. And obviously that one in the middle is an OLED. This is what I use. This is kind of like behind the scenes. Man, these monitors though, I want to say something. Out of all my monitors, these monitors are the ones I'll probably never ever get rid of. These monitors, they've been rock solid since I got them in 2017. They have a kickstand that pops out on the side so you can hang your headphones. Like you can hang your headphones on the kickstand. They've got kickstands on them. All of them have built-in speakers. All my monitors have built-in speakers. Only the LG has good built-in speakers. The Sony's is okay, but the LG has some really nice built-in speakers. The built-in speakers on these old monitors is also kind of okay, but not nearly as good as the larger monitors. The Sony has a KVM. It has a built-in, an included KVM in there. You're looking at the wrong one. No, these are 144. You're probably looking at the G-Sync ones. These are FreeSync ones. There was a 165 variant of those monitors, and that was a G-Sync monitor. Those actually had the G-Sync panel in them, I believe, if it was the 165 hertz variant. But these did not have a G-Sync module. These were literally FreeSync / G-Sync compatible monitors. I have some old YouTube videos from years ago with these monitors. But yeah, I probably should do... A lot of people have been asking to do like a setup tour video. I guess a lot of people seem to like that type of content. I honestly don't see the point of that type of content. Maybe I'll make a video like that. That could be something that could go on like a Patreon video or whatever. But yeah, like that kind of thing. Like people who want to actually see the setup, like how it's actually, you know, what it actually looks like. I mean, it's literally just the 3 monitors. The PlayStation 5 is sitting behind one of the monitors, and then it's like the computer's on the desk, on the floor actually. Yeah, you're looking at the AOC monitor. AOC Agon 241QX. Actually, the physical monitor is AG241QX. If you search this, you will find it. This is no longer manufactured. I bought this monitor in 2017. It was a long time ago. That was the time to get into 1440p. I made the jump because that was when most people were jumping to 1440p. Now, I don't know now I think a lot of people are going to 1440 because they don't want to spend money on like a 4090 for 4K. That's the way I look at it. There's a lot of compromises that you have to make when you're playing games at 4K. Like, it was mentioned earlier, the whole like having to rely on upscaling from 1440 to 4K. The reality though is 1440 upscaled to 4K is totally fine. Visually, there's enough data in a 1440p image to upscale to 4K and it will still look good. This is significantly better than, say, 1080p upscaling to 4K. Or 720p upscaled to 1440p. And that's the reason why I've seen a lot of people say, like, how come these newer games that are meant to go with the PS5 look worse than, like, PS4? And that's because typically they're doing 720p upscaling to either, like, 1440 or 4K, which is, like, that's really not going to look good at all, no matter what. It doesn't matter how good DLSS is. 720 to 4K upscale is going to look like garbage. There's just not enough data in the pixels to be able to reconstruct a good image. However, 1440p has enough data to stretch to 4K with the machine learning and even with FSR3 that it looks totally fine. So, and that's how I play most of my games. Most of my games rely on either DLSS or FSR3 to play them at 4K with all the settings maxed out. Otherwise, if I was playing them at 4K native, I'd be playing them at like medium settings on a 7900 XTX, for example. Or it depends on the game. Some of them you can get away with like high settings and it'll be fine. But like the really, really new games that have really good graphics, no, you really need upscaling. COD on 4K, you get about 120 FPS low settings because of competitive shooter. Also, the monitor is only 144. Yeah, and that's totally fine. Yeah. I mean, and that's how I used to play, like, for years. I was doing this. These were my main monitors for a very long time. Like, I had 3 of those in a row for a very long time. Up until 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I bought the Sony InZone M9 and made the jump to 4K and never looked back. Okay, let's, since we are now at the point here, we need to get to the final story. So the last thing I wanted to talk about on the stream, and this was from the very beginning of the stream, Game of the Year. Okay, the nominees for Game of the Year have been, and I know a lot of people don't really care too much about the Game Awards because the show has kind of become a meme at this point. It has lost a lot of credibility over the years. It's like every other year it kind of does something controversial. So I'll never forget the whole, like, I think the most memorable Game of the Year for me for a long time is going to be Game of the Year 2022 because of the, oh man, I'm trying to remember the quote. I'd like to dedicate this award to my rehabilitated friend, the something Bill Clinton. You guys know what I'm talking about? The end of the show, From Software went up, Miyazaki and staff went on stage to accept the Game of the Year award for Elden Ring, and there was that one guy who followed them up on stage and started talking about, like, my reformed something Bill Clinton, something not, remember? You guys know what I'm talking about if you watched the show 2 years ago? So anyway, this played out worse than I thought, although I was afraid that this would happen. I had been saying this on stream for a while, that Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree is going to end up on the list, even though I personally don't feel that Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree should be on this list. I feel like there's a number of other games that are just as good as these 6 games that should have been given a shot at Game of the Year. One of them is Dragon's Dogma 2. I personally think that Dragon's Dogma 2 should be on this list instead of Shadow of the Erdtree. I really don't understand why. Well, the thing is, I have listened to people who have given the counter argument as to why Shadow of the Erdtree deserves to be on this list. And the more I think about it, the more I understand that argument, and I kind of understand why the Shadow of the Erdtree does kind of deserve to be on the list, but ultimately, you know, I still kind of think it shouldn't be in this list. I think even though it's such a good game, at the end of the day, it just feels kind of weird seeing Elden Ring on there again when considering the fact that it already won Game of the Year 2 years ago. So that's the thing that really gets to me, the fact that Elden Ring already won Game of the Year. And it's like, oh, here it is again. Elden Ring's here again. It seems like every time From Software has a game come out that is something like Dark Souls, they always win now. It's like, what is it going to take to see a From Software game get on the Game of the Year list and then lose? Like, what is it going to take to see them actually lose? Is it going to be GTA 6? Or is Monster Hunter Wilds? Like, what if it was like Elden Ring 2 versus, or Bloodborne 2 in 2026, just hypothetically? Like, let's just think about this hypothetical situation. Imagine if it's 2025 or 2026, whatever. Let's say 2025. And the contenders for Game of the Year are Bloodborne 2, Monster Hunter Wilds, because you know that one's going to be on the list, GTA 6, and 3 other random games that are just so happen to be really good. Maybe there's like a Nintendo game, like a Zelda game or whatever, and then like some 2 other or 3 other games. Like some rando games that just show up on the list. Kind of like Balatrio and Astrobot. Now, I don't have anything against those 2 games. Those 2 games do seem like really good games. I still need to play Astrobot. It's definitely the best platform game of the year, for sure. It's a really good platformer. But I'm just saying, like, you know, like, imagine if it was Rockstar versus From Software versus Capcom for Game of the Year. Who would actually win? Meaning, what does it take to dethrone From Software from winning Game of the Year? Because it seems like they always seem to win. Every time there's a Dark Souls type of game, they just always de facto win. It's been like this for a long time. But Bloodborne is only on PS5 Pro. So, Astrobot is only on PlayStation 5. It's still a contender. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is only on PlayStation 5, and that's a contender for Game of the Year. So console exclusivity doesn't matter. If the game is good, it will make it to the list. Look at all those Zelda games that would get on the list, and those are only on the Switch. Yeah, if Bloodborne 2 came out, it would literally be PS5 exclusive, and it would also be a contender for Game of the Year. Like, it would guaranteed be a contender for Game of the Year. Like, the hype behind Bloodborne 2 would literally rival the hype behind Monster Hunter Wilds and GTA 6. So, yeah, it's also kind of weird how they do the cutoff so early. They have the show in the first half of December. I mean, I understand why they do this. Sometimes I wish they would do this show in January instead of December, so they could include more games that came out later in the year. Games like Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora literally got completely overlooked. That game came out at the end of last year, so it missed the cutoff for getting nominated for any award. And then fast forward, here we are a year later, and Avatar, that was a really great game visually, and audio was good on that game. Sound design was good. The graphics were very good, and it's not recognized for anything. It's like it didn't even exist. So, I guess, word of advice, don't release your game in December if you want it to actually be considered for any sort of award. That's what I'm getting out of that. That's my takeaway. Don't ever launch your game in December if you want people to notice it long term. Avatar should be the new Crisis meme. Most beautiful game I've played like that. Yeah, Avatar was a really good game, and it ran really well too. The Snowball engine or whatever, that Snowdrop engine, man, that was a good engine. So it's hilarious because it's like there are so many people out there. There's so many social influencers out there that are going out of their way now to nominate and get their entire audience of like 3 million subs or whatever to go and vote for Shadow of the Erdtree. It's kind of sad. And they're doing it out of spite to all the people who said that Shadow of the Erdtree should not be on the list. There are literally people out there, big channel social influencers with like hundreds of thousands of subscribers or followers on Twitch or subscribers on Twitch and subscribers on YouTube that have told their entire audience that they're going to vote for Shadow of the Erdtree to spite all those people out there that say that Shadow of the Erdtree doesn't deserve to be on the list. So it's creating this stupid, like, unnecessary conflict where now it's like, and their thing is like, okay, you can't blame From Software for making the game because they made a great game. You have to blame the people, the committee who selected these 6 games. So, yeah, as much as I enjoyed Shadow of the Erdtree, I don't think it should be Game of the Year. It's really good. It is very good, but I really think they need some new categories. And the other thing too that's kind of sad is these people are literally voting for Shadow of the Erdtree on every single category that it was nominated on. Not just Game of the Year, but all the other categories that Shadow of the Erdtree is also in. Just to spite the people that are saying that it shouldn't be there. Which is kind of sad, but they're doing it out of some kind of righteous reasoning, which is not 100% wrong, but also I just don't know if it's the right way to go about these things. Yeah, so so if I have to choose from these 6 games, you guys probably already know what I'm going to say. Out of the 6 games. Out of these games, so I have not played Balatro at all. Balatro I've not played. Astrobot I also have not played. But the other 4 I have played. So I can't really say anything on Astrobot and Balatro. I actually don't even know anything about Balatro. I have seen gameplay of Astrobot and I have seen reviews of Astrobot. So my impression of Astrobot is that it's a very good game. But I have not played it at all personally, so I can't really comment on it. Balatro, I have no idea what this is. I assume this is a card game. It's some kind of trading card game or whatever. I don't know anything about it. But I've heard people say that they've literally spent like 1,000+ hours on it. Balatro won Best Indie Game. Okay, I mean, okay, I assumed it was some kind of indie game because it's like I never heard of it before. Black Myth Wukong is a good game. Just like Shadow of the Erdtree, though, I don't think that Wukong is Game of the Year. And I'm being 100% honest. And I'm someone who played a lot of this game. And it's a good game, just like Shadow of the Erdtree, but I don't think it's Game of the Year. Metaphor ReFantazio. Metaphor ReFantazio is another really, really good, deep game. A lot of people compare Metaphor ReFantazio to Lord of the Rings in terms of the scale, in terms of the scope, the world building, the factions, the epic quest that the protagonist goes on, the locations, the biomes, the diversity of where you go throughout the story as it unravels is very good. It's very intriguing. A lot of people have compared Metaphor ReFantazio, or they say that Metaphor ReFantazio feels like a 90s RPG with modern style, quality of life features, and graphics and cinematography compared to the way graphics were in the 90s when you had the PlayStation 1 and the N64 and the graphics were very rudimentary and you didn't really have a lot of complex scenes and things, but you could still get the general feel of the scope of the story and how grandiose the world was. Games like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, the Xenogears, GoldenEye. You had all these like fantastic games from the 90s. And a lot of people that played Metaphor ReFantazio, I have not finished ReFantazio, I want to point that out, but I have played quite a bit of it. And from the time that I've spent with the game, I will agree with that statement that, yeah, it does feel like there's this sense of epic scope, that it does have this very old school RPG feel, with a lot of modern flair and aesthetics and a lot of like quality of life. Like, you know how in the olden days when you were playing an RPG, you know, every battle your characters are not fully healed. Nowadays it's like, oh, after the battle everyone's already back to full health. I mean, there's some kind of mix of that with this, but it does have this more challenging feel and just an interesting story overall. It's one of those games that it kind of sticks with you after you play through the whole thing. And it's another type of game where as soon as you finish the game, you want to talk about the game with other people who have also finished the game and kind of analyze some of like the themes and things that were in there. So ReFantazio, I understand why it's on this list, because it is pretty deep. It has a lot of stuff in there. Astrobot won Best Audio Design and Studio of the Year at the Joystick Awards. Yeah, Astrobot, I've heard, has very good music and very good sound design. Between Balatro and Astrobot, I'll most likely end up playing Astrobot at some point. I don't know if I'll ever play Balatro, though. But for me, Game of the Year is probably, for me personally, it's going to be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like, if you didn't see that coming, I mean, you're probably new to the channel or whatever. But I'm voting for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because this one, I recently completed the game. So, and it took me basically, the whole year? Because this game came out back in February. And I played 85% of the game. Maybe 85% of the game on the original PlayStation 5 in the 30 frames per second mode. And then being able to play the remaining 15% of the game on the PS5 Pro with the upgraded graphics and everything and the 60 frames per second. Yeah, this game, I wish I could have played the whole thing on the PS5 Pro from start to finish. But yeah, this game just has it all. Like this game has exactly what I want to see in a game of the year. It has a great story. It has an epic cast. It has a very memorable cast of characters. The villain is very memorable. The supporting cast, meaning not the playable characters, but the other characters that are like outside of your immediate party, they're also well written and well thought out. The main plot, the way you traverse through the game, it has this way of bringing you into a new area, and you don't get immediately bored with the game, or you never feel like it's a chore of having to go and explore a new zone, for example. These open world zones that they did with the Rebirth series. This is in contrast to another PlayStation 5 game that I played this year, which is called Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin has a very similar structure. You go to a new area, you explore the area, you collect stuff, you fight enemies. You basically convert the territory from a chaotic, crime-ridden Ronin area to a law-abiding place that you've restored order. That's basically the format for Rise of the Ronin. The problem with Rise of the Ronin, unlike Final Fantasy, the areas are very repetitive and it gets very boring. Final Fantasy VII does effectively the same thing. Like, you go to a new area. You're in the Junon area. You explore that area. You get the Chocobo. You start climbing mountains. You go and do side quests, or you just keep doing the main quest and you progress across the ocean to the Western continent. And you just keep going with the story that way. But it's like you get to a new area. Okay, we're going to Corral. We're going to Costa del Sol. Oh, we're on a giant cruise ship now. Okay. Now we're going to go to the mountains. Now we're going to go to the desert. Now we're going to get in the buggy. Like, it has a progression. Now we're going to go to the jungle biome. Now we're going to go to the nuclear reactor place. You know, it's like it goes into these areas that are so interesting to look at. The environment is interesting. The music is amazing. although it's Square Enix, so that's expected. So it just kind of does everything that I expect a Game of the Year contender to do. It has a great combat system. It's very deep. It can be very easy to pick up, but very hard to master, especially on the higher difficulty levels. So it kind of has that general sense of you feel satisfied playing a game like Rebirth, especially when you're trying to go for 100%. Like, this is the type of game that I want to platinum. Like, it's very rare for me to bother to get a platinum trophy or do all the achievements in a game. But if the game makes me want to get the platinum trophy, that to me signals that it's a very good game. And Rebirth is most likely a game that I will get the platinum trophy. And it's been a very long time since I've done platinum trophies on games. I think the last time I did one might have been either Lies of P or something even further back. Maybe it was Elden Ring. So it's been a while. But this game has that vibe. So definitely for me, Game of the Year is going to be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It basically has the entire package. Like, when I compare it to these other games, obviously I have not played Astrobot and Balatro, so I can't fairly compare it to those. But compared to Black Myth Wukong has the same sense of exploration, but it doesn't have enough. There's something about Wukong that seems like it's lacking. Like, it has good combat. The combat doesn't feel as deep as other action games that I've played, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that deep. It's deep enough. It has memorable locations, especially like Chapter 3. Chapter 3, I'll always remember that chapter. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 seem to stick out to me in my memory of playing that game. So it has that, because that is another sign of a good game. The combat is easy to pick up. It's very dodge and counterattack oriented in terms of the combat. There's different stances, but I feel like where Wukong kind of falls short a little bit, the combat doesn't feel as deep or as satisfying as other action games that I've played. Like, for example, I'll even use Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, to me, has a more satisfying combat system than Black Myth Wukong. And the only way you'd be able to make that comparison is if you go and play Final Fantasy 16 on the higher difficulty level. Then you also go play Black Myth Wukong on the higher difficulty level. And then you'll see exactly what I mean in terms of the depth of the combat. Because the cool thing about action games is you never get to feel how deep the combat system is in an action game until you play it on the higher difficulty. Until you're playing on hard mode or nightmare mode or whatever. Like Final Fantasy 16 calls it Final Fantasy mode, which is like nightmare difficulty or Dante Must Die difficulty on Devil May Cry. So it's like a much, much more challenging game. Basically, playing Final Fantasy 16 on the harder mode makes you feel like you're playing a completely different game, because you can die way easier if you mess up. So you're dodging, you're parrying, your comboing opportunity, your window of opportunity to do your counterattacks, that is so much more precious to you when you're playing on the higher difficulty level. So you value that more, and you just naturally are forced to become better at the combat system. And that's one of the reasons why the From Software games are so popular, because the default difficulty is like hard mode. So there's no easy mode. So you basically are forced to learn the combat system the way it was meant to be mastered. And games like Black Myth Wukong and Final Fantasy 16 also have that quality. So, otherwise, the locations in Wukong are pretty cool. So it's got a good amount of variety in terms of world exploration, level exploration, the depth, the puzzles. It basically has the full package. So I can understand why it's here. It's just, for me personally, Rebirth just seems to just have that extra essence that just propels it above the other 5 games on this list. Yeah, it depends on what you play. Do you like Devil May Cry? Have you played Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry? Or better yet, Neo or Neo 2? Because, see, when I look at Black Myth Wukong, I'm looking at it from the lens of it's an action game. At the end of the day, Black Myth Wukong is an action game. So I'm going to grade it based off of my experience with playing action games. So I'm going to compare it to Stellar Blade. If we're talking more recent games, Stellar Blade is another really good action game that came out this year. However, a lot of people, like, there was someone in the chat was saying Stellar Blade was their game of the year. I mean, and that's fine. I understand why. That game is a good game. But I don't think Stellar Blade is as deep combat wise. It can be pretty deep though, especially if you're playing it on subsequent playthroughs and you have all the skill tree upgrades and stuff like that. Stellar Blade feels like it's lacking in certain aspects, like I feel like they could have done stuff differently with that game. Less parry based and more action. To me, I feel like Stellar Blade, if Stellar Blade played more like Nier and Devil May Cry or Bayonetta compared to Lies of P, because to me, Stellar Blade feels like I'm playing Lies of P. And I didn't really find that style of gameplay that enjoyable. After a while, it gets pretty repetitive because all you're doing is you're essentially just looking at the enemy and waiting to parry them. That's basically what it is. It's kind of like playing Sekiro. The only difference is Stellar Blade and Lies of P don't feel as satisfying timing-wise as a game like Sekiro. Like Sekiro, if I have to rank them in terms of the parry-based action games, Sekiro is definitely number one. Number two is probably gonna be Stellar Blade, and Lies of P probably had the worst parry window. Like, it was the tightest one, and I think they nerfed it like once to make it a little bit easier, but it was still like, it just would get tedious because you're literally just like trying to parry everything and then do your counterattacks. So I just go for the builds where I build up meter so I can do my like L1 plus square or L1 plus triangle spam to just nuke the enemies before they can even do anything. So that's kind of how I ended up playing Stellar Blade in the late game. But yeah, Stellar Blade's a good game that I don't think that one should be Game of the Year. As at least it shouldn't be nominated. A lot of people said Stellar Blade. I don't know. Personally, the one game that's not on this list that I think should be on this list is Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma 2 was probably the most fun. So I've said this last stream. The game that I had the most fun playing last year was not Baldur's Gate 3. It was not Armored Core 6. It was not Lies of P. It was Lords of the Fallen. Lords of the Fallen was my personal game of the year last year. So when I think of 2023, and someone says, what was gaming in 2023 like? In my mind, the first game that comes to my mind is Lords of the Fallen. Likewise, going into this year, when I look back on 2024, when somebody asks me what was gaming like in 2024, I'm going to think of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like, that is the game that's going to define this year for me. Like, yeah, there were great action games. Wukong was this year. Stellar Blade was this year. Shadow of the Erd Tree was this year. Those are all really good. But, you know, I don't know. Like, to me, it's like we've gotten so many action games, and it's almost like everybody seems to want to make a parry-based action game now to mimic, like, the success of Sekiro. We had that last year with Team Ninja's Wolong Fallen Dynasty. This year, I completely forgot, Rise of the Ronin. Yeah, this year had, like, so many action games. Rise of the Ronin was parry-based. Stellar Blade was parry-based. Wukong is not parry-based. It's dodge-based, but it's effectively the same thing because the difference is instead of tapping block at the right moment, you do the dodge at the right moment. So you get your after-image dodge. So it's still kind of similar. So I don't know. I feel like that's a trend that's probably going to die off in the next 2 years. Like parry-based action games. because I feel like at this point it's so overdone, and maybe that's why I don't rank Wukong and Stellar Blade that high, and Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin is basically big Neo, just like Elden Ring is big Dark Souls. Or let's put this another way: Rise of the Ronin is open world Neo, just like how Elden Ring is open world Dark Souls. So the next thing we're probably gonna get is like open world Lies of P or something. You know, like some kind of equivalent. Because I think there is gonna be a sequel to Lies of P. They've already said that. So yeah, ultimately it depends. It's what you guys find. It's gonna be personal preference at the end of the day. Like, everybody's gonna feel differently about certain games, but I try to be as objective as possible on looking at the game as a whole, not just, oh, this one's an action game, oh, this one's an RPG. No, I look at more than one thing, because it's like, it's got to have the whole package. And for me, out of all these games, Rebirth has the whole package. So that one's Game of the Year. Obviously, if this was a different award for like something else, like graphics, obviously it would be there'd be a different winner. Or if it was like best at, like, I don't know, sound design or something, it would be different. Or best art direction, it would probably be different. Rebirth won 4 nominations from the Joystick Awards: best storytelling, best soundtrack, best. Yeah, but see, when it has best, to me that sounds like a Game of the Year. Because, like I said, it's got the whole package. It's like the most well-rounded, and when it wins a lot of nominations, that to me is a sign of a Game of the Year. So that's probably going to be it for this stream. Yeah, that covers it. You have a question about the X870 Tai Chi? How much heat does the Gen 5 when you use it at max speed? I did not like the Hero's temperatures on the Gen 5 SSD. I thought it ran too hot. It idles at like 62 degrees. That's idling, doing absolutely nothing on the Hero. The Tai Chi, I don't know if it does better. I did not test a Gen 5 SSD on the Tai Chi, so I don't know. If I had to guess, they'd probably be similar, though. Both of them would probably be worse than the Gigabyte Aorus Master, if we're talking Gen 5 cooling. The Aorus Master has a much, much larger heatsink. And the Aorus Master, to put things into perspective, this motherboard, it keeps the SSD at like 50 degrees Celsius. The Asus, 60 degrees Celsius on the Gen 5 SSD. So that's a 10-degree difference between the Aorus Master, where the Aorus Master is actually better, significantly better than the Crosshair Hero at cooling the Gen 5 SSD. Now, you mentioned Tai Chi. I don't know, because I never tested the Gen 5 SSD on the Tai Chi. So I do not know. Just looking at it visually, I would assume it would be just as bad as the Asus, though. Because this doesn't look as large as the Aorus heatsink. The Aorus heatsink is an enormous heatsink. It is definitely a quality heatsink for Gen 5 cooling. Whereas this looks like it is, but it's not. And when I first saw it in my unboxing video, I even commented, like, this slab of metal looks like it's not going to cool that well. But, and I was right, because it doesn't do a good job at all. And the review from Tech Power Up said the exact same thing. They said that it thermal throttles the SSD under load. So, yeah, not good. I hope that answers the question. Alright, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. It was kind of longer than I thought it would be. We kind of went into the woods about a bunch of random stuff on, I don't know, like triple monitor setups and ThinkPads and stuff like that, which was kind of a weird tangent. But alright, guys, that's going to be it. I'll see you guys next week on the next episode of Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.